Hello, hello, lovely people. Just enjoying a little bit of coffee before the stream. That tastes good. How's everyone else doing? Oh god, we might need to log out of ArtStation for just a second. I don't want to get inundated by a bunch of pings. Or we can just mute the tab, I guess. We can do that too. There we go. Okay, cool. Espresso or Turkish? Latte. Latte macchiato. That is my favorite type of coffee because I'm still convinced that I don't really like coffee. Weirdly enough. Like if you were to just like serve me like black coffee, I don't really enjoy that. So I don't know. Maybe there's a part of me that doesn't enjoy coffee, and I'm just used to having a little bit of sugar and milk in it because otherwise I can't stand it. Or here's another possibility, and this one is probably way more likely. Maybe I've not had good coffee in my life before, you know? That might also be the thing. That reminds me, there's oh my god, a couple of years ago, I mean, it's not a couple of years ago, this is like almost 10 years ago at this point. Is it? Anyway, besides the point. Went to Poland, and we were in Wrocław, or Wrocław. And I think I discovered like my favorite coffee shop, like my all-time favorite coffee shop there. It was so good, and I used to have like a big vanilla latte macchiato there. Oh my god, it was so good. So we went there as a trip because my girlfriend, I mean, we just wanted to get like any excuse really to like go on a little holiday. But my partner was spending a lot of time getting tattooed. So I just had a lot of time by myself. And honestly, I spent like 90% of that time just in that coffee shop with a sketchbook, just sketching stuff and like making notes and all that kind of stuff. It was so fun. Oh my god. Sounds so weird when I say it out loud, but I had so much fun. Oh my god. You guys saying I cook Turkish with cold coffee? Black is too strong. I get the shakes. Yeah. I've never really gotten the shakes yet, right? I mean, I'm not looking to get them anyway. But it's interesting whenever people say like, oh, I get the shakes from like strong coffee or like energy drinks or something like that. I just can't relate to it because I don't drink that much of it anyway. Yeah. I cook Turkish with a cold coffee. Cold coffee does sound nice though. I need to, by the sounds of it, even by just that little sentence there, I need to up my coffee game. Kazuki is saying milk and sugar all the way. I grew up with cafe con leche. Coffee with milk. Yeah. Since I wasn't allowed to drink it as a kid, my mom would let me dip my bread in it, and it was sweet. Yeah. I've heard that from a fair amount of people. A couple of Brazilians that I talked to, I think in Venezuela they do the same thing as well. But every kind of culture has their own like different thing on it, right? Interestingly enough, like here in Belgium, the way that we used to there was this like thing that we did as kids where we would have coffee, we would dip like speculoos in the coffee so that it's like fully soaked up. We would put that in between bread, smear it all over the bread, and then eat it. It's so good. It is so good. It is actually so good that it is now a product that you can just buy off the shelf. I would still argue it's not as good as doing it manually by hand. It is so much better. But yeah, it is really tasty. And I loved it. It's been a while since I had it, so I need to get back into it. Maybe I'll do that over the weekend or something. Sounds delicious. Yeah. It is probably like very similar to the thing that you just mentioned, right? Like dip your bread in it in like coffee with milk. It sort of got the same vibe going on. I drink so much coffee, it doesn't have any effect on me. I could drink coffee and take a nap right after. Yeah, I wondered, right? Because, yeah, I don't know what the science behind that is, right? You probably do get used to it. But I do notice a difference whenever I drink coffee or not. So sometimes what I'll do, and this is my guilty pleasure, like in the evening, I'll drink like a frappe, which is, I think it comes from Greece, and this is not even like a traditional frappe, right? But you can get them in like little packets, and then I add like milk to it, a couple of ice cubes, and that's what I'll drink in the summer. It's really nice, very tasty. But yeah, I do notice a difference in like my sleep schedule. Whenever I drink that and I fall asleep, I feel less refreshed the next morning. Yeah. I do notice the caffeine when I'm at the gym. Oh, interesting. Maybe there's some like multiplying effect going on there, you know? I had to learn to drink coffee, says Lily. I dislike the taste very much, but I started to love it. And I tried the iced coffee from McDonald's. Oh, right. Yeah. Um, that is interesting. I feel like honestly, when it comes to coffee, sugar is the on ramp for a lot of people. You know? Mm-mm-mm. But yeah, I think that was the same for me, honestly. Um, I can't remember how I started drinking coffee. I have no clue. It must be during uni. 100% it must be during uni because before that well, I wasn't really drinking coffee. I was too busy getting fucking hammered just drinking booze all the time, which also I do not recommend. Not a great time. But hey, hey, Shitty Podcast. Happy that I could make it. Welcome. Good to see you here, buddy. But yeah, Coffee Talk. Oh my god, such a good game, by the way. If you haven't played Coffee Talk, the first one, play it. It's like, it is probably like one of my all-time favorite games, where you'd run like a little coffee shop and you just get to talk to people. I think it was also why I really loved that coffee shop that we went to in Poland as well, because I was playing that game at the time and it was just like the stars just aligned, you know. But anyway, enough talking about coffee. We had our massive art blast yesterday for the team challenges, and I've been really enjoying going through all people's work and all the posts. So let's do some of that stuff together as well, because I do want to share some of the cool stuff that people have been making. And as you can see, we are on the game art page, and I just love seeing all the Kingdom Below posts coming in here too. It's really cool. So let's open a couple ones. Let's check some of them out. Because I'm curious. Because here's the thing, right? With these challenges, what is happening is that we as the organization, we just have like a broad view of things, right? But I don't really get like an in-depth view of what everyone did during these 5 weeks, right? So I'm just gonna scroll through a couple of ones, check out a couple of them, and then we can kind of see what everyone has been up to. Oh yeah, I did see this on the Discord server before. Like the presentation here has been really well done. I just love like the kind of artistic flares to it. Really nicely done. The Arbas looks super cool. I'm thinking about participating next time. Do it. Yeah, this is so that we don't get to see, right? So, amazing crystal shaders made by the team member Anki. Yeah, those are cool. It is just really cool to see like all the teams just coming together. So yeah, great stuff, Lily. Love the post. Then we got Ashish next. Oh, adding some parchments as well on top of it too. That is cool. You've done some coin piles. Oh, with geometry nodes? Dude, that's super fun. Oh, some simulations too. Love to see it. Yeah, that's cool. I like it. This stuff is super fun to play around with like geometry nodes and just like scattering stuff. I just love that stuff so much. Yeah, that's cool. Cool to see it. And we have Finn showcasing all the beautiful work he's done on the bell, I'm assuming? Oh, no real breakdowns or anything, but I think Finn was responsible for the challenge. Let's actually have a look. Responsible for locking into the initial competition, landscapes, rocks, and some of the other small stuff here, but my main focus on the project was to be very active feedback-wise. Okay. So more like an art directing role, like you said. Okay, interesting. That is cool. I'm curious to see who's done the bell then. Okay, Senna did the bell. Cool. Oh no, the bell material. Oh no, the full bell. Okay. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, great stuff on the Senate. It's looking really nice. Great stuff. And then Justin, we've got Justin coming in again. What did you do this time? I should just say, really have fun with the challenge. Would definitely participate in the next one if I have the time. Hey, that's awesome. Thank you for posting that in the chat, because that's really cool to see. You know, that's all we're doing it for, really. It's just that people have fun, they have something interesting to showcase on their portfolio, and they learn to work in a team, get to know source control, all that kind of stuff, right? And then, of course, the beautiful end results, they kind of speak for themselves. Okay, Justin is doing some material breakdowns. Some trims as well. Not gonna lie, it's really cool to see people grow through these challenges as well, which is really interesting to see. Yeah, a lot of cool stuff here. Ooh, I like this. This counter effect. Yeah, it really showcases like how quick you have to go in these challenges, right? And it's it. The thing that is always going to be funny to me is the switch from like week 4 where people are sweating. And then it just like, it turns into like something beautiful, you know, because everything just comes together in the final week. I'm not just going to say something because he asked me to in the chat. That's not how this works. It's our project. Oh, Justin, are you getting your feedback? No. So I'm just going through like the art blast from like all the team challenges, just picking like a couple of top things that I'm seeing. Yeah, going through the posts and enjoying what I'm seeing. Felix doing some cool rocks. Love it. Yeah, this is super cool. So that you have like the base material coming from someone else, and then RGB baked masking and all that kind of stuff coming on top of it. This is such an underappreciated thing that's happening here, right? Where you take something that someone else made, and then like add your own stuff on top of it, right? To just like add flexibility and modularity to the whole thing. Really cool to see. Hey, and the first place winners, congratulations. Basically learned geometry nodes in Blender through this challenge. I couldn't use Maya anymore. Well, I mean, hey, if there's ever an excuse that you need, that's it. I was just looking at this as Zoe. They're also cool. Yeah, everyone has done a great job on it. Jael. Oh, the base sculpt. Okay, and the little pillars. They look so cool, by the way. This is something that we were discussing as the final submissions came in. We were really surprised with like how consistent all of it felt, especially in the stylized category, because I think stylized has the added difficulty modifier where you all have to work towards a consistent style, right? Where like with realistic, there is a little bit more forgiveness because a lot of it just comes from the amount of detail and the amount of stuff that you have in the scene, right? Where the stylized to me is more like a simplified version of that when we just look at the art style, right? Which means that for a stylized team, you have to be in line at all the times, making sure that if you do sculpt in like a similar, that if you do sculpting, it has to be in a similar way that someone else is doing the sculpting on their thing, which is, yeah, really interesting. It's like an additional thing that you have to do as a part of a stylized team. Yeah. Beautiful stuff, Jael. Lily is saying we kept posting whips and giving each other feedback, which helped a lot. We picked an existing art style and tried to stick to it. That is probably the good thing. You know, like you don't want to overcomplicate something that's only going to take you like 5 weeks. Because a small decision in the beginning where you say like, hey, look, we're just going to come up with our own new thing has like a massive ramifications down the line, right? So that's a good choice. Sticking to like something that already existed and then trying to match it, but then putting your own spin on it by just doing something different, right? Like different as in the thematic is going to be different. So even if you take, let's say the Overwatch art style, right? But you do something, you do a different location with it, it's still going to stand out by itself. Yeah. Cool stuff, Jael. Really cool to see like all these small details. Oh, that's awesome. I like the little skybox thing. Can you see? I didn't even notice that. Yeah, that's awesome. Ashraf showcasing the bell. Ooh, a little cool breakdown banner. Dang, okay. That's cool. A lot of trim sheet stuff. And the pillars. This is a good breakdown as well. You know, showcasing step by step all the layers that you've done. Yeah, this stuff is cool. Really cool to see this. And then some additional props as well. So this is all just for like the main pillar, right? Yeah, okay. That's awesome. I love the flexibility of this, right? You could make like an entire section of a village just with like all the stuff that was created here. Just really cool. Yeah, awesome stuff. Yeah, some really good knowledge about like presentation in there as well. Breakdown. It seems like these banners are like a good way to split things up. A lot of people seem to be using them. Yeah. Cool. All these additional props to the side. Really adding like character to the whole environment. Ooh. Even creating the fire effects yourself? That's awesome. Leia saying, Quinton, his props are really well made. Him and V worked really hard. Yeah, you can tell. Like, all these props, I'm surprised by, like, how much depth there is to some of these posts, you know? Because, I mean, there's a lot of content here. And the thing is, the thing that I always tend to focus on is how reusable a lot of it is, right? So, for example, this kit down here with the planks and the beams and all that kind of stuff, you can do so much with that. Like, oh my god, you can do a lot with that stuff. I'm somewhat surprised that the team wasn't like bolder with like using it even more, you know, like having like wooden scaffolding like up the sides at like a certain angle. I think that would be like, yeah. But hey, it's only 5 weeks, right? So time is short. Yeah, cool stuff, Quinton. Just a couple more, and then we're probably going to be switching over to some portfolio reviews as well. Yeah. Yeah, some really nice presentations. This is such a nice trim texture, by the way. Like when I saw this in presentation, I really like it. It has like a nice chunky kind of feel to it, you know? Really well done. And then of course, I didn't even notice this at first because we actually met up with Brigitte, who is the mentor of this team. And she had to tell me that like, hey, did you find like the Beyond Extended logo? And I was like, no, I don't think I've seen it. And then I had to kind of zoom in because you can kind of see it like slightly on the door, which is nice. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, really, really cool stuff. Again, amazing work here. And of course, congratulations on the win. But yeah, really good presentation as well. Feels very thematically appropriate, you know? It kind of has its own spin on it, which is good. Yeah, nice stuff. Bloomgate. Oh, I think that's a cool name for an environment. But yeah, a lot of amazing work done. So yeah, if you see anyone's work floating around on ArtStation, go check it out. Give them a like, give them a comment, because they've done a fantastic job. Really nice clean sculpts, you know? Very nice shapes. A nice amount of detail on it. Because yeah, that's what I like. Again, like this is my personal favorite, right? There's just something about like how well organized it is in terms of the amount of detail in this environment. That's the thing that I always hammer on, right? So I like it when a team just takes that to the fullest extent. Because the rock sculpts, they're not too noisy, but that means that you have really noisy foliage, but it doesn't become noisy overall because you have clean surfaces, the rocks themselves, and you have like details surrounding it, right? Like it feels really well balanced between all the different aspects. So yeah, really well done. Because that is something that like takes iteration, you know? I don't know if we have, yeah, we have the GIF over here. Yeah, you can kind of see, the foliage coming in and then just being like, okay, I think we can add a bit more, and kind of building up over time all the foliage, which is really, really nice. I love the way that the vines are guiding the eye. Yeah, I think there is like a section where they add the vines for the first time. Let me see if I can find the frame here. And I actually really like this specific foreground vine. This one specifically. I think it's kind of a shame that it kind of got reduced after a couple of iterations. But this one is really nice. It just really goes from like the foreground all the way to the background. Takes you into the scene really nicely. Then I think they kind of reduce it and they put it more down, which still, it still like serves the same sort of purpose, right? But it's a bit more muted. Where I think this is, yeah, this is almost like a very stylized approach to like guiding the eye, you know? Yeah. Really cool stuff. Last one that I'll have a look at from Cade. Yeah, I'm curious because Cade did a good job on all the architectural stuff. The rubble pile, super versatile. Getting like a couple of cage meshes in. Yes. Yes. Love it. Using Kyle's castle walls as a base. This is also a thing, right? Like these castle walls are made by someone else and then taking them and then doing destruction and then adding your own assets into the mix to kind of break them up. It's just, yeah, beautifully done. Beautifully done. I love to see that. That collaboration between people, especially in this case like Cade and Kyle, is really good stuff. Love to see it. So much technical stuff that went into it too, you know, that we don't even get to see like most of the time. Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff, Kate. Leia saying, I think I would prefer some kind of percentage for how points are distributed. I noticed that lighting takes a huge part in which team gets more points. No, it doesn't. Like lighting actually gets less points. So what happens is there was some confusion happening, and this is not confusion by like people actually like looking at the points. This was confusing because the way that we organize the data. Because what we do is we get the raw points. So like to explain the process, right? A judge, whenever they do the voting, they vote everything on 10 points, right? So they have 5 categories. Let me quickly check what the categories were, just to really get everything straight. No, not that page. So, the 5 categories for every team were overall quality, composition, lighting, visual storytelling, and thematic, right? So, the judges all vote on 10 points. What we then do after the fact is on submit, we then weight the points to what we think is more appropriate, right? Overall quality actually gets doubled. So if your scene just looks like overall from like very good quality, those points get doubled. Lighting actually gets halved because we don't think lighting is, especially for this challenge, is as important as visual storytelling or your composition, right? So those get halved, and the thematic actually gets quartered. So you hitting the thematic, right, or like your work making it like thematically appropriate, is actually like pretty low down in the weighting. Because if you can work to like a certain thematic for this specific challenge, we don't value that at the same way that we do composition. That wouldn't make sense. So that's what we do. The issue there is that we didn't really have a good way or a proper way to showcase the weighted points after the fact. So that's something that we're going to fix for next time. But then still, like after the weighting, after we weight the points, right? We still just like count them up as normal. What is the best way to create destruction? Previously, I used Unreal Fracture to create destruction. This time, I use Blender. I'm not really happy with either ones. I want a better way. We do have a workshop on creating destruction. It's an older one, but I implore you to check that one out because that one is pretty good. But Fracture is still a good method. What I tend to do, personally, is I tend to use booleans, but I use booleans in a way where I try to proceduralize them a lot. So what I mean by that is, let's say I have like a stone path, then I'll just grab like a sphere. I'll displace that sphere with like a height map of sort of the shapes that I want, right? So if I want angular shapes, I'm gonna get like a very sharp height map. If I want soft shapes, I'll do like a blended height map or like a more blurred height map, right? And then I use that shape to then cut out of the stone path that I have. That's the way that I create destruction. because I find that like way better. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll use those two methods in conjunction, right? So I'll do fracturing first, and then I'll do more specific Boolean cutouts so that I can get like specific shapes to what I want. Because fracturing, the issue with fracturing is that it's always going to look like Voronoi noise or whatever you use as like the input method, right? If you don't want that, you need to have some additional ways to add destruction or like get specific shapes on top of it. Does the challenge also judge based on real-time optimization? No, it doesn't. It does not. We used to have this, but here's the thing. Judges don't really have time. Well, both the teams and the judges don't really have time to make everything optimized. Because what we recognize is that a team challenge, the main thing there is not necessarily whether you can make like a real-time optimized environment, right? That is not really the point. The core of what we're trying to teach you there is collaboration, communication, teamwork, working with source control, all that kind of stuff. So that's what we put priority on. Because we actually used to have like an optimization category. But then what we need to do is basically all the work that we now ask the entire team challenge to do in the last 2 weeks, right? Where you go through the breakdowns and you present your work and all that kind of stuff. Now we need to then shuffle that into the challenge. Because yeah, now you need to present that as like a thing, right? So yeah, I don't think that's on the cards. Not for the foreseeable future anyway. Just because the team challenges have a different priority. But yeah, thanks for asking the question, though. I appreciate those questions. And talking about questions, if you are here for your first time, you're just popping in, feel free to ask me any questions about the games industry, what is working in the games industry, what is working on like games, personal work, ArtStation, whatever you want to ask me questions about. Because myself, I've been in the industry for like 10 years. Currently working as a senior environment artist. So if you want to ask me anything, feel free to ask. And that's what these are for, as we go into some portfolio reviews in just a second. Thanks for the advice, Tim. No worries, no worries. Yeah, I love doing things in like, I don't know, very unordinary ways. Because I feel like, so here's the thing, right? Like with all the things that I've tried in my entire career, and then also like from a student before, I just tried like a bunch of shit, you know? And just like, I'm talking about like the most random stuff that you can think of, you know? Like, and from those, I actually have some things that would actually like pretty valuable. For the longest time, for example, I was creating foliage with like particle systems in Blender because it was like a really powerful tool that is not really made for foliage, but I was using it for foliage creation. Now it sort of got replaced by my own tools that I've made with like geometry nodes, but for the longest time I was still using particle effects. It was like really flexible actually. But yeah, that's when I say that, I always have to think about what I try to do with these, with my portfolio reviews and with Wednesdays, is I'm trying to let you take the shortest path to the end result, right? While still exploring a little bit. But it's weird because a lot of the stuff that I now know is because I was just like tinkering around with stuff on my own, like that not really contributed to my portfolio necessarily, right? So there's a lot of value there too. Cameron Eddy used Boolean, by the way. Is that what you're talking about? From Cameron Eddy? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he did. Let's have a quick look. Bam, bam, bam. Okay, so this is what you're talking about, right? So focus on this. It is somewhat similar, honestly. So you just use in this instance is the shape of a rock to kind of give you some destruction that is shaped like a rock, right? That is sort of what I do. However, I don't do it in Engine. I do it in Blender. But yeah. So, but instead of this, what I would do, because a rock gives you like pretty generic destruction, right? Which can work. This is not a bad thing, right? But what I would try in this case, I would use the height map for the tiles that you already have, so for like the bricks for the wall, and then see if I can exaggerate some of those values to then give me a cutout that looks like the bricks are actually falling out, right? And then I would then also blend that with like some destruction from maybe a rock or something like that to create like a little bit of a different effect. So what my effect would look like is, or what I would try to achieve, right, is kind of doing a blend of what I would do and what Cameron is doing. Because Cameron has like this really nice effect that is coming from the bottom. Can I actually pause this somewhere? Let's actually pause this. Right, so Cameron has this cool effect where you have this like nice broken up transition, right? But then what I want to see is at a certain point, I want to almost see like a cutout of like an individual brick. And then it goes into like some destruction again, right? And that's where you can combine like multiple booleans after each other to kind of get this effect of this kind of destruction, right? But again, given timelines, this is a really good way of creating this effect. And that is exactly what I would do as well. So yeah, that's a good example. Got a couple of questions coming in. Leia is saying if you do it in Engine, you can add another material slot and does another draw call. So if you would do it in Blender, all you need is to re-UV that section, assign the UV. Yeah, I mean, but in this case, like another material slot is not too bad, right? Especially if you're talking about something that has been built out of modules anyway. And usually you have like a generic destruction kind of material anyway, right? So I don't think that's too bad. Because here's the thing, like, both have pros and cons, right? If you then add another material slot, sure, you're adding another draw call. But if you can then reuse that material in other places, then you're justifying it, right? Because if there is like a generic material that is just like, I don't know, rock destruction, right? I can use that on broken rocks. I can use that on architecture. You can use that in many places, right? And this is where we go into the weeds of why it's sometimes difficult to answer like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Is that okay? Because there is a very stark difference between what you are doing for your portfolio and what is then done for, like, let's say an open world game, right? Where like with an open world game, you usually have a library of stuff that you have to work with first before you then add unique stuff on top of it. Where like your portfolio in most cases is the opposite way around, where you're trying to maximize the amount of cool stuff that you can present. That usually means that you're going to do unique stuff, or at least making something that is relatively bespoke to what you're doing, right? Where in the games industry, what you're trying to do is, hey, I need orange rock. I am just gonna grab gray rock and then multiply a color over it to kind of get it as close as I can, and that's gonna be good enough because that's gonna be more performant than adding like a new texture that is orange rock, you know, that kind of stuff. But it is good to keep that in mind, because sometimes I think what can get you to win on a on an interview is you doing something on your portfolio and then explaining why you've done so and what the effects of that could be in a production environment, right? Because here's the thing, you might be doing something wrong. Well, you might be doing something like objectively wrong, right? So let's say I invite you to like a meeting and we're going to be talking about like potentially hiring you. Let's try to give an example. What could be a good example for this? Okay, atlasing, the act of having like multiple textures in one texture, right? Is very commonly done. So let's say you have like a bottle and a toolbox, right? To make it very clear. We can add them to the same texture. And that is a totally fine thing to do. However, I could look at that on your portfolio and then I could be like, wait, that is weird. However, if you then come to me and you say like, yeah, but these are always going to be used in conjunction because the bottle is actually like, I don't know, like some mechanical tool like WD-40 or something like that. You know, it is always going to be used with the toolbox. So that's why we're just pulling in one texture set instead of two texture sets, right? That makes a lot of sense, performance-wise. However, you could then look at that and be like, wait, it's kind of weird that there's like a bunch of stuff added on top of each other here. So sometimes it comes down to the explanation and why you've done stuff, right? Because also the counterpoint could happen there too, where if you have like, let's say a wooden plank and a metal toolbox and you add them to the same UVs, then the argument becomes the opposite, right? Because how many times are you going to use like a wooden plank in the toolbox in the same scene? Which means that if you only have the plank in your scene, you're still pulling in the textures from that toolbox too, right? Hope that makes sense. But that's why sometimes it's very, very bound to what your situation is, right? Like what the platform is you're publishing to, what kind of game it is, you know, like all these things like factor into play. Devil is asking how you're doing. I'm doing good. How are you doing? And how is everyone else doing, by the way? Hope everyone's having a good time. Tadine is asking, hey Tim, what do you recommend to do when making an environment to show that we can follow a pipeline? I hope my question is clear. What do you recommend to do when making an environment to show that you can follow a pipeline? I'm not too sure, Tadine, because a pipeline sometimes get confused with workflow, right? Where pipeline to me is the pipeline starts at the beginning, so concept art, and all the way to the end, like post-processing, right? So I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean a specific workflow, let's say trim sheet, or a full pipeline? Let's say following a concept art. Those are two different things, right? In the meantime, Devil is asking a question. Do you know like fab assets, like the packs for environments, models like trees, plants and rocks, etc.? Would studios ever buy these kind of things and use it for the games? Yeah, they do. Or are these models always just made from scratch in all productions? So there's a difference, right? Like in smaller productions, let's say you're an indie developer or maybe even AA developer, you will be buying those asset packs, right? But they are sort of a shortcut to getting assets in for a scene, right? But you still have to adapt them to the style of your game, right? So they're not free, but they're cheaper than having to do everything from scratch, right? So it's like a shortcut there. For AAA games, they usually make everything from scratch because that is the connotation of AAA, right? And also think about like companies like, for example, Ubisoft. They have their own massive catalog of games and they have their own internal systems where they can request something that was, let's say, made in like an older Far Cry to then have that updated to like a newer Far Cry, right? Which is still cheaper than having to make it from scratch. But yeah. So they are definitely used and they're definitely bought. It just depends on the type of studio. I think I'm just very, very performance pilled for a portfolio. It's important to make it look good. I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's always, It's always a balance between the technical and the artistic, right? And I think you lead more into like the technical aspects, Leia. So that's totally fine. There's also nothing wrong with what you're saying, right? Like it makes a lot of sense too. But yeah, sometimes it gets really difficult because you have to go into the weeds like almost immediately, right? Ashish is asking, or like contributing to the conversation, saying then you should always maximize the use of your UV space, because if it's a small asset and it only uses like 10% of the UVs. Oh no, always use UV space to the max. Because if you have a small asset and it's only using 10% of your UVs, that means that your textures are too big. You need to scale down the textures. That's it. If you have empty space in your UVs, you are throwing out performance. That's a very bad thing to do. To the point where I can almost guarantee you that if I see a lot of empty space on your UVs, I know that you don't know how that works fundamentally, and you probably won't get the job. I think it's one of those like telltale signs that you have a lot of learning still left to do, you know? Which actually, and this is going to contradict to what I see a lot of people gravitate towards our website for, because we have a whole explanation about textile density, right? We have like a whole document written, and it's one of our most popular resources that's publicly available. What I don't like about that is that people now tend to over-index on textile density, which means that they look at their textures and they're like, oh, I need to press the textile density button, and then it shrinks down their UVs, which leaves like a bunch of like empty space in your UVs. And it's like, no. You need to always maximize the UV space, because let's say if you're working towards like 512 pixels per meter, right? If your textile density is going to be 700 or something like that, that is not a bad thing. You know, that is not a bad thing. It gives you just more resolution for that asset, right? As long as we maximize it. Of course, there is a point to where, let's say your textile density, the aim is like 512, and you get to like, I don't know, 1,400, then you know that again, you need to change your texture size, right? So that means that you need to, in this case, scale up your textures. Wait, no, scale down your textures. This is where it gets a little bit confusing, but that's what you need to keep in mind, right? Tadine, back to your questions. A full pipeline to show the studio that it can adopt rather than just doing something that looks good. Yeah, and this is talking about like the full pipeline. Wait, let me be clear, right? Like, a company never expects you to do the full pipeline, as in like make the concept art yourself, and then do the modeling, and then do the characters, and then do the lighting, and all those things, they're done by separate people, right? Sure, as an environment artist, you have to do like a large part of it, but you're not expected to come up with the concept art yourself. That's why we have concept artists. So first things first there. You are not doing the entire pipeline, and you are not becoming a generalist, right? In a lot of cases, especially for the AAA studios, generalists just don't get the job because they can hire someone more specialized and focused on like a single thing, right? Now, when it comes to our focus as environment artists, the way that I would always go about this is, if you're doing something from the first time, pick a really simple concept and then try to execute on that, right? Showcase that you can take something from concept art to final render and present it in an Unreal Engine file. Yeah, exactly. I just want to be clear for people in the chat as well, Tadine. So as I was saying, like if you just focus on like the stuff that we do as environment artists, right? You can take a concept art, execute on that well, showcase that you can get into the engine and that you can follow a concept art while also making improvements upon it, right? Because sometimes what's going to happen with a concept art is that you have to deviate because it doesn't make sense, right? Because sometimes the translation between 2D and 3D doesn't translate 100%. So there are things where you have to think on your feet. Or for example, we see this there's a couple of people now doing like houses, right? And they're like, wait, I see the front of the house. What do I have to do with the back of the house? And that's where you have to do your own research and kind of add on top of it, right? Yeah. So there is that expectation. But I think, in my personal opinion, once you've done a couple of those projects and you can showcase like, hey, I can follow a concept and I can execute on it and my textures look beautiful and blah, 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 blah. Now I want to see like, okay, we know that you can work towards like industry standards. Who am I hiring as an artist? What do you bring to the table as your own creative input, right? Because that is also super important, you know? Sure, we work towards... the reason why I say this is, let's say you only focus on executing concept art, you can become very good at it. But you're gonna hit a ceiling at a certain point, because after you gain some seniority, you are expected to step up and you're expected to make creative decisions. If you don't have that, you build yourself a ceiling, right? Whereas like other people where they are trading those skills and they're trying to do different things and they're trying to be creative and they try to branch out a little bit, they are gonna break through that ceiling and they can then go to like higher seniorities and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that you can't reach like senior, right? But I think I look at seniority from like a global scale, not as like an individual studio. What I mean by that is, you can get really, really good at doing production work, but if you want to become a really good artist, those are two separate things. Because production work focuses on executing for the most part, and then becoming a very good artist focuses on creative input, right? So a balance between those two is warranted. Yeah. I hope that helps. Beauty is saying, if we use concept artists for a portfolio scene, how much do we need to stick to it? Is it better to try to make it one-on-one and use it as a reference, or to make something my own? That's what I just said, right? That's what I just said. Like, at a certain point, once you've gotten used to like doing your own concepts, well, let me stick to your question actually. In the beginning, stick to concept art. Stick to concept art until you hit a blocker, right? That's where you have to branch out and you have to do something else, right? Because there's no information, so you will have to do your own thing. But hey, if you're comfortable at like recreating like concepts and you want to take it a step further, then you could use it as like a rough guide and then make something that you want to do like on top of it, right? Here's the thing with that is that if you use a base concept art and then you try to improve upon it, those things, those improvements, they need to be exactly what they are. They need to be improvements. Because if you make a decision and it goes back in terms of quality, or it takes away from like the world building that has been done, that is going to look bad, right? So you don't want to do that. If it's like a creative direction that's slightly different, and like we can live with it, but that's where it gets interesting, right? You need to then showcase like, hey, I did this because of this, and then the other people should be like, oh, that's actually a good decision, you know? Which is why I'll give you this one recommendation. That's why going with like very loose concepts is way more interesting than picking a solid concept. I'll show you a book. Where is the book? Yeah, there it is. So this is a book that I am honored to be in. This comes from a Russian artist. We collabed a little bit during one of the ArtStation challenges. So she made like all these beautiful concepts. I'll share her ArtStation in just a little bit so that you can check her work out. But you can see like it's very, it is very loose, you know? Like if you look at the type of sketches and work that we're seeing here, all this stuff is like pretty loose. Which is the thing that is going to be really helpful if you then want to make your own work on top of it, because you can take some of those loose sketches and then you can build your own interpretation on top of it, right? So we did that. She did the first month of the ArtStation challenge, and then I did like the second month of the ArtStation challenge, and then she was kind enough to include me in this book as well, with my work over here. The reason why I bring this up is for two things. I'm kind of proud of it. Not gonna lie. It was really fun. Had a really nice collaboration with her. It was really fun to do some of that collaboration. The first time that I actually had to collaborate with someone professionally like that was really fun. Second thing though is whenever you're going on ArtStation and you're looking at concepts that you want to make, don't go looking for like the big fancy ones. Pick junior concept artists that are trying to get into the industry and see what they're doing and see how you can improve upon it. Because that is going to be way easier than trying to do something that's already been made by like a senior artist, because then the tendency of you just having to replicate is going to be higher. Right. And that's always the way that I functioned as well. And I promised a link as well. So let me have a look. What's her name again? I think it's all written in Russian as well. Let's see. I think it's with a K. Let me have a look. Ba-da-ba-bam. Is she even still on ArtStation? Oh, there it is. Oh, no, it is with a C. Okay, cool. Let me share her ArtStation, and then we'll browse through it really quickly. And then we'll dive into some additional questions. We're going to scroll down. So this is what I based my work on, right? And you can tell it is just like very loose. Like nothing is really, sure, there's indications of architecture there and it kind of feels like it could be something, but there's still enough room for interpretation there for you to then add stuff on top of, right? And then if we go to my page, I think I still have it like online as well. Yeah, and then this is, oh my God, like almost 10 years ago, but this is my interpretation of it, right? And that meant that I kind of had to do a lot of research, like trying to figure out like, what is the architecture like? What is the vibe of this whole place like? Is it abandoned? Is it still there? But it was really cool to kind of have something like pretty rough and then just having to deal with that and try to make my own decisions, you know, rather than having everything already thought out for you and then not having to do anything. This is difficult in the beginning, but this is something that you can work towards, you know? I mean, it depends, right? Like I say difficult in the beginning. I was also doing this like in my first year of being in the industry. I wasn't that good then. So I don't want to make it sound like it's like super difficult either. Anyway, let's go back to some more questions. Lily is saying, so at some point coming up with your own designs is the way to move through the ceiling then? So, very specifically, Lily, the way that I look at the ceiling, and I come from this with my own standpoint, right? For me, I look at the industry as a way to build up your creative skills, but then the question becomes, okay, what if your creative skills have sort of potentially outgrown the industry, right? Because I feel like it's really easy to be within this industry and just do a production role and just keep executing at a high level, right? A lot of people find that rewarding too. But the way that I look at this is there was always this friction that I had with it, where I just wanted to do my own thing, which then means that you always have to keep developing like your own artistic taste and your art style and all that kind of stuff. That was always important for me, right? So I want to say that with like a big caveat that was like important for me. But there's other people in this industry that have made like a very successful career of mostly just getting concepts, executing, and doing all that kind of stuff, right? But for me, the way that I looked at this is like myself, like me as an artist, was always a priority number one. This industry was just a way of getting like paid to do the stuff that I wanted to do, right? So I really want to put like a caveat on that, because there's some people that are just like more production minded and they would fit very well in the studio, where I think I've always had this like natural friction against it because I'm an artist first and then a production artist on that side, you know? But yeah, I get like a lot of fulfillment, even with the stuff that I haven't finished, right? I get a lot of fulfillment of like trying to build out a world and designing all the things in it and like really taking my time, like tinkering about it. That's the stuff that I love to do. It's just really hard to make like money out of it, you know? Nadine is asking, I love to get a personal portfolio review. I like it to be private if that's possible. Should I register somewhere on your website? We currently don't have the space for that, and I currently don't have the bandwidth for it either, necessarily. I'll have to think about that one, because it's not currently something that we offer. So, good question, Tadine, but sorry, I can't help you at the moment with that. Ashish is saying, I did the same thing with my previous project. It was a very loose concept, and I combined real buildings I saw from Google Maps and integrated them with it. That's the thing, right? Like, do something like that where you take, like, ooh, I like this world, and now I'm gonna add another layer of realism into it by going to Google Maps and then picking like a bunch of buildings and doing something like that, right? The combination of the two is actually pretty good. Pretty good combination. Let's see. Justin was asking a question before. So what sort of level of detail do studios expect in artist breakdowns? I try to filter out the noise in my posts, but I also have to market myself and who I am as an individual in my posts as well. Dude, give me all the nerdy shit that I want to see. Right? Like, all the detail. The thing is, it is in the way that you present that detail that is going to make it readable or not, right? And this is why we do these portfolio sessions, right? And you've seen this before, where there are some people that don't really think about their presentation and they just have like a bunch of stuff on their ArtStation page. That is not going to work. But there's also people that have very meticulous and really go into depth with a lot of stuff, and their breakdowns get a lot of engagement. Why is that? Because they spend the additional time on the presentation and they really think about, okay, if I land on this page, I want to see this first, then the next chapter is going to be this, then I go into this, and it needs to be presented in this way, so I'm going to make it a video, and then I'm going to do some video editing, and then I'm going to do like this as an image, so I'm going to do some image editing and all that kind of stuff. That is more important than yeah, I think the presentation is way more important than just thinking about like, oh, how much stuff do I need to show? Because you can show everything that you've done. And if it's presented in a really well done way, I'll love it, you know? But yeah, go into detail, be nerdy. So yeah. The Dean is asking for the UVs. Does that mean we need to change the textile density based on the asset size? Shouldn't we say consistent? No. You're changing your texture size, not your textile density. So if your textile density goes up, right, which means more. So let's say you wanna scale up your UVs, right, which means that you're adding more detail into your UVs. Let me think. What is the best way to explain this? Because at first the priority is your UVs, right? Maximizing your UV space, because that's where the performance comes in, right? Then the second thing is staying somewhat close to your textile density, right? Again, textile density of 512. If you have 700, that's good. If you have 400, that's also still good, you know? Your textile density should be as close to that number as you can get, without it dropping down to, like, let's say half or double, because that indicates that you just need to change your texture size instead, right? Because let's say our textile density is 512, but then you measure your UVs and your textile density is like 200. That means that we don't have enough resolution at all to hit our textile density, which then means that we need to double our resolution on our textures, right? So instead of using a 512 for that texture, we go to a 1K, right? Because that gives us more resolution, which then helps us bump our textile density up, right? Yeah. But textile density is like a measurement that shouldn't be exact. It should be as close to as possible within a given reason. If you have an asset like a branch or, like a bench or something that has long UV islands, would you add a seam in the middle if the UV islands cover less than half the whole area? Or you can use a 2x1 texture. You can make a texture that is like 1000 pixels wide, like 1K wide and 512 high. You can do that too. And that's probably a better way to dealing with like very long, consistent UV shells. And then use triplanar projection when texturing. No, triplanar projection is really expensive, because you're tripling your texture samplers, right? Because now you're not only using the UVs, you are also like projecting it from like top, side, and top and both sides, right? So triplanar texturing is only useful in certain cases. Let's say big elements, or where you want to have like macro blending, but they should not be used on like your general assets at all. Makes no sense. Let's see, did we miss some other questions in the beginning? I don't think so. Okay, I think we managed to... Thorav is saying, was watching a video around Crimson Desert, and they used smaller 256 textures to make 5... They used a smaller 256 texture to make a 512 texture. Okay. What, like upsampling? Like dynamic upsampling? Or what might also happen is that they use, as base render, they use 256 textures to then give you like upscaling, like let's say a high resolution pack where it just switches to 512. That could also be happening. And they don't seem to have a texture beyond 1K. Yeah, I mean, look, like you don't need a lot of resolution to make stuff look like really interesting. However, I will say that like Crimson Desert, when it comes to like its materials and the way that it's blending stuff together, is pretty boring. You know, it's just not exciting to look at like a building in like Crimson Desert because it is pretty plain. So that comes with that restriction, you know. Hello, Guillaume. Good to see you. Conceptual vision, that goes for RGB masking as well. I'm not sure what you're referring to with that, because we talk about a lot of stuff already, and there's a tiny bit of delay. So, in reference to what? Sorry, conceptual vision. I always see people working with like material layered system in their portfolio pieces, but I was always told by tech artists that it's heavy on performance. Is showing it a bad idea in a breakdown post? Well, no. If you are using it, right, just show it off. Because it depends very much on how you use it, right? A material layering system actually has a lot of benefits because you are, in an ideal case, you are using a lot of resources that are already pulled in to the environment, right? So what that means is, let's say you have a metal texture, and then you have a moss texture, and then you have a metal moss. I don't know. Let's say a dirt texture, right? You can then use those textures in multiple places on a lot of different surfaces, and that is gonna really optimize the way that the scene is rendered, right? Because now you're not using like a couple of master materials and hundreds of material instances. You are just using like a very modular stack of like materials that can be used all over the place, right? Again, see previous comments where it depends on the circumstance, but material layering systems are great. Like Leia saying, a lot of studios are using it too. Yep, there's a lot of great examples. But you have to see where those comments are coming from, right? I'll give you some general advice. This is some generally good advice, and I want people to do the same thing when you're coming to this channel as well, right? Or any other channel. Look at their professional credibility, right? We live in an age where there's a lot of really good and useful tutorials going on YouTube. But there's also a bunch of like people that pretend that they know how a game works when they're just a gamer themselves, right? And it's not necessarily that I mind the way that they share the information, but if they claim that something is broken or doesn't work in a certain way, right? There are fixes for that, and there's probably a good explanation of why the devs are using it. Yeah, that was a side point, right? Like not to your point, Dean, necessarily. But again, like it can be very specific in, let's say, what could be a good example here? Let's say you have a scene that deals with a lot of unique information, right? Let's say it's a big set piece in like a God of War game. You can use material layering systems for that. But that is probably not what you want to use for that situation, right? Because it makes no sense. You can get to like a certain degree of like visual interest with that workflow, but it's just not the correct workflow. So what I'm saying is that sometimes people don't recommend to do certain things because that is the thing that was not useful on projects that they worked on, potentially. Mm-hmm. Alan McKay spoke about friends in the business he had who just made tutorials to get their names out there, but didn't put in effort or completion into doing it good. Interesting. Because that kind of runs against like the entire point, right? Because sure, you might get traction with, let's say, students, right? Because most of the time they're still young, they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to like deep technical knowledge for the most part. But people working in the industry, they do. So let's say you make like a bad video talking about something that is just blatantly wrong. You're just going to be promoting yourself as a person who doesn't know what they're talking about, right? And if I then see a video like that, and I'm like, oh, it's this person. Yeah, we're not even going to entertain talking to them because yeah, it's not great. So it's interesting, right? It almost becomes the YouTube videos that people put out. They yeah, it becomes a part of like your public profile. It was in a situation like Gnomon getting asked saying yes but doing poorly. Yeah, I mean, I have done stuff like that myself, I'm not gonna lie. Where I've been in like a couple of magazines, right? So I was in, God, I can't remember. 3D Artist magazine like a while back. I was in two entries of them. The first time that I did it, I honestly miscalculated the amount of time that it would take. I underestimated how quick the timeline was coming up. And I just like bashed something together to kind of get it into the magazine because the timeline was there, right? Not proud of that one. But sometimes that is just the way that it is, right? Sure, there is like a responsibility there. And I still sort of, I mean, I don't really carry it with me like a backpack of guilt, you know? But it was a point where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that again unless I feel like properly prepared for that, right? So I can kind of see that like a lot of people are put in that position, and maybe what happens as well, and this is very common by the way, and I'm still trying to get better at this myself too, is that you have pretty good artists, right? And I would consider myself like pretty good artist, but they are generally like pretty bad at like teaching. So the whole reason why I'm doing these live streams, and I was doing them on Twitch before, is because with the single goal of obviously like helping people, but also for me to get better at what I do, right? To get better at like explaining to you in like very clear, understandable language that how concepts work, right? Or how something works in this industry. And that is a completely different skill. I'm still jealous. For example, like Yu Chu, right? Like we've worked with him like multiple times. I think he does a fantastic job of like teaching people. Very understandable, very clear, very to the point, doesn't have filler in his content. And sure, he does a lot of editing, but like even in the workshops that he does, like, oh my God. It's yeah, it's amazing. Like how much time and effort he put into that, and like teaching himself that. I just remember Alan being angry about it since he puts a lot of effort into good teaching, just as it seems like you do. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can remember. There are certain moments in time where I would have loved to see people like put in more effort for the stuff that we were doing as well. So I can definitely get it. Yeah, because it's still Beyond Extend is still my baby, right? So if someone comes in and then I don't know, for whatever reason does a shitty job, like the thing that I don't care about is I don't care about the excuses, because it's still there though. You know, it's still there. You still had a job to fulfill. So it's yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. Sorry, Conceptual Vision. To go back to your previous comment, RGB masking as well in relation to triplanar and how expensive it gets. Oh yeah, like if anything uses triplanar, it gets like it has to sample like triple the texture samplers, right? When it comes to RGB masking, I don't know why you would ever do RGB masking on triplanar projection, honestly. I can't really think of a good reason instantly there. Leia saying we use the material layering system for the theme challenge. For the next project, we're going to be using substrate slabs. Stuff like that is a goldmine for your portfolio. Is it though? I asked it as a general question, right? Because I know that like from Unreal, it's progressing that way. But the majority, like 60% of the industry, is still just using in-house engines that are not using Substrate, right? So, yeah. I mean, maybe from like from like an exposure perspective, you know, maybe that could help. And sure, that contributes to like the whole portfolio thing. Robert Couts is saying, I've seen some people mention that for Unreal Terrain, they use static tiles meshes because the landscape actor is too performance intensive for real games. Do you know about that workflow? I know about that workflow, but I don't know about the intricacies of it because I have not done any professional games within Unreal. I've only worked with like in-house engines for companies, so no clue on the specifics. And most of the people that I've worked with, obviously at companies, have also only worked with like in-house engines. So yeah, not too sure. I do know about the workflow though. There's still a lot of companies that like still model out a lot of like their big landscape chunks or even like sections of like, I don't know, towns or cities or something like that. So yeah, I'm not surprised by it. Because you do have like a certain amount of control over those meshes, right? Because you can then very specifically cut them up in a way that is very specific to the way that you render things in your game, and then lot them out like simpler or something like that. The thing is, Unreal Engine will push Substrate as a default shader model at a certain point in time. Isn't it always? Isn't it already? I have not upgraded to like the latest Unreal Engine, but I think from 5.7 wasn't it going to be the default one? Or has that not happened yet? I'm so out of the loop. I've been confused since my mentor told me not to use it. Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Like if, that's why I try to be very specific with some of the wording that I use, and then obviously I add like a lot of caveats and a lot of context to the stuff that I talk about. Because let's say in that example, right, where like you shouldn't use material layering, that is just not blatantly not true. Like you can use material layering. It is just that material layering has a specific use case, just like every other workflow does, right? So yeah. I wonder what the words were used there. Like a fly in the conversation, you know? Because that's honestly like the most confusing, but also the beautiful thing about game art is that there's technically nothing really wrong. So let's take the example that we just had now, right? Where I think it was Conceptual Vision. I'm saying that like, hey, does that also go for RGB masking in relation to triplanar projection, right? Even for that, I'm like, I don't know, or I can't really see a good way of using those two together. But that doesn't mean that it isn't out there. You know, there's probably going to be like, I don't know, freaking smarter people than I am doing like really crazy shit with this stuff. True. I wonder how you would do the LODs to make sure there's no gaps between the tiles when the load goes to low resolution. Well, you just retain the silhouette, right? That is like the most important thing there. Oh, you're right, Robert Couts. Yeah. That is true. That is true. Yeah. I mean, yeah, but then using triplanar projection on like RGB masking. The reason why I'm so confused is because RGB masking is something that is used to add unique detail. Well, in most cases, it's used to add unique detail on top of something that is tiling or trim sheet based or something like that, right? It gives you that additional layer. So then trying to do something with triplanar projection, you're basically stripping it away again, and you're making that information tileable once more, right? Which is why I'm confused. That's why I'm saying like I don't really can't really see of a good use case there. Maybe I'm wrong, you know? Harry is saying, I think where the clash occurs too is people have different ideas and opinions of what's the best practice and what not to do. Oh yeah, very, very common, you know? Because here's the thing, like any company out there that is making games has their own workflows based on the history of their previous workflows, right? So even if you have like a new project that's coming up, it is still going to be building on the tools that you made before for the previous project, right? Because otherwise, like making all your tools from scratch is just going to be freaking chaos every time. But that means that also it's not only the tools, it's also the tools, the workflows, and the people behind those workflows, right? Because it might be that the workflow that company X is using now has been built by a person who actually didn't really know what they were doing at that time, which is fine. But then the company kind of got stuck with it, and now they're dealing with the consequences of that workflow still being used over time, right? And sure, we try to do our best to make it like easy for everyone, right? But the reality is that there's oftentimes just not enough time to do that. So yeah, it's just a long way of saying that, like, I think it's not only the games, it's just like any tech industry especially, it's just a combination of like people's best ideas at that given moment in time that then got solidified somewhat in stone and then got built upon later, right? So yeah. And everyone, you know, even like if you take the ideas that I now have from, like, let's say open world creation techniques, right? And then I go to the next company and let's say we start from scratch. And then we want to build like the next open world game. I'm going to go in with like a bunch of opinions and things that I learned that then become like the foundation for that next studio, right? And then the only thing that's going to make that's going to test if they are going to last through time is just by going through time, you know. RGB masking is sort of triplanar if you used it on a huge rock side, I guess. A huge rock side, yeah, like a cliff, you mean, right? Yeah, but it's still using like yeah, it is still using like unique data, right? Anyway, it's good to learn for artists to know how texture layering works. Yeah, 100%, totally agree. And there's also nothing wrong with going with like simple interpretations, right? Just vertex painting still does a lot of good stuff. That is super simple to set up. Because sometimes we get so taken aback by like, ooh, all this fancy stuff. But sometimes the most boring stuff still works really well. What do you recommend to do while looking for the next contract? Mine ended a few days ago. Or a few X ago. I don't know what the X stands for. Well, what do you recommend to do if you're looking for the next contract? Make better stuff, right? This kind of depends on where you are in your career, I would say. If you are early in your career, I would probably say make better stuff. If you are somewhat already advancing in your career, a couple of years on, you then have the choice, right? I would say that then the choice becomes, okay, am I going to keep doing this, or am I slowly going to see if I can do something else and kind of make my own income to the side as well? Again, I've always been a fan of this, but like we actually have like a wealth of skills that we are somewhat underutilizing most of the time, because we make cool shit. We make cool interactive environments, right? So think about that and think about like what other stuff that you can do with that, right? One of the simpler things is make an environment that is modular and then sell that modular kit on Fab, right? That is a simple thing to do. You could then also just take that to YouTube, let's say. You could build your own Patreon. You could do architectural visualization on the side. You could start building your own kit on that. You could do a lot of stuff. It just, what it most of the time comes down to is, and I'm going to ask the age-old question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? Use that question as like a guiding line to figure out what you have to do now. Because for me, the longest time, and this sort of changes over time, right? So I'll tell you about my goals. And to a weird degree, it might still be, but my initial goal was to become an art director. Now, the weird thing is, this goal has changed, but only because the way that I saw an art director being was not the way that the industry sees an art director to be, right? I'll explain this because an art director kind of has like a less hands-on approach. And me as a student coming into the industry, I always had this idea of like, sure, I want to be guiding the team and like, you know, building cool stuff, but I still want to be hands-on. Whereas with a lot of the stuff in the industry, especially on bigger productions, you can't be hands-on. There's too much people to manage. There's too much stuff for you to like art direct, you know, so you can't really be hands-on. So I still want to do that, just not in the typical production sense, I would say. But what that meant for me is that over time, I started realizing, okay, if I want to do this in and this is coming to your point, conceptual vision. What I started realizing is that over time, my likeliness of becoming an art director in the games industry was really, really difficult. Because if you think about a company that has like 500 people working in it, there's usually just one art director, you know? Maybe two, depending on the complexity of the task and all that kind of stuff, right? But it's still just one art director. So if you then have to think about like your chances of getting there, out of all the people, you know, chances are pretty slim. Now, I like a fight, you know? But then combining that with my previous comment of just like, oh, maybe I don't want to do this in like a very traditional like studio way. It kind of led me to like, okay, what else do I have, right? What else can I do? And then I started like exploring like mentoring, because that was also some sort of like art directing. You're helping people. It was like my first foray into like really helping other people with like mentoring and art directing that way. And that kind of like really, really gelled with me, the way that I was doing this. So over time, of course, that grew into what I'm doing today, which is sort of like we organize all these things and I try to play as much of an art direction role into everything that I can, as much as possible, right? So yeah, I think this is something that slowly builds over time, but just asking that question of like, hey, where do I want to be in 5 years? And asking yourself that question, even though it's a stupid, silly question when it comes up in an interview, it is actually a pretty good question for yourself, I think, occasionally. Where it's like, hey, is the stuff that I'm doing now still relevant to the goal that I want to hit in 5 years? If not, how can I manage the gap between the two? And how can I align my current actions with my goals better, right? But yeah, to your point, conceptual vision, this is sort of art directing what you do here. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I love giving feedback and doing the portfolio reviews and helping other people out, because it's sort of like a mini version of it. And in the future, so my contract is also ending in like a month, right? So I'm gonna have a lot of time freed up when it comes to that. I want to do more stuff when it comes to art directing, right? I don't know what that means just yet, but I want to be building stuff and then doing that together with a bunch of cool people. Who knows what that's going to be? While I'm also doing the course and all that kind of stuff, right? So that is definitely going to be in there too, but it leaves me with the potential, the time potential to do some really cool stuff with it. Justin is asking, any advice on preparation for the interviews? I got one in a couple of hours. I'm low-key feeling nervous. I think, like, yeah, feeling nervous is going to be like a part of it, right? I think feeling nervous is just an indication of how important this is for you, right? Which is good. You know, you should be happy about that. And first of all, congratulations on getting the interview, by the way. But some tips. If this is your first interview, usually it depends on the studio, right? But like usually they will just be talking about your portfolio, how you've done stuff. But yeah, it depends. It depends on the studio, right? Because as Leia is saying, sometimes you just have like an HR conversation. If you work with like a bigger company, it's usually HR first, and that is usually just like, hey, can you tell me about your CV? Can you tell me about this? Like, what qualifications do you have? Like, what's your relocation look like? When's your availability like? You know, like all that kind of stuff. But it depends. It depends on the studio. What I would say, just do preparation. Know what the company is working on. Know what the company is working on. Know what they have worked on before. Try to ideally play a little bit of it. Ideally, yeah, you've already played some of their games, which should be ideal. And this shouldn't be the hard one, but like know your work, right? Like know that they can ask you stuff about your portfolio, and you should be ready to like nerd out and explain stuff from it. And then, like Ashish is saying, ask them questions, flip the script. It's not even flipping the script. You should be asking questions. You should 100% be asking the questions. Especially, let's say with HR, like, what is the salary bracket that's expected for this position? You know, ask them that question. There's nothing wrong with asking that question in the first interview, right? There are certain interviews where I've got invited for an interview and I said like, hey, just to save both parties some time, this is my salary bracket. If that is not within your expectations, feel free to let me know. And I have gotten studios to cancel because they were just like, oh, that's out of our range, you know? That is fine. But if they're not going to pay you what you're worth anyway, then, I mean, it's different when it's a junior, of course, but yeah. So yeah, have that in mind already. Have a number in mind, you know, so that you're not taken aback when they ask you like, what is your salary expectation? You know, be ready for that question. Have a number in mind. Have that number be higher than your actual ideal salary, right? And then negotiate with them afterwards. What else? Yeah, I would ask them a lot of questions about if they have a relocation budget, if you have to move for the position, and also just ask them about the studio. You know, what is the studio's position on working overtime, for example? What do you think is this studio's main driver to guarantee me my success? You know, or like how does the studio like help me become better as an artist? You know, stuff like that. Like genuine questions where like the answers might be like, ooh, this is actually like a company that I want to work for because they had a good idea on what to ask, right? And there's no wrong questions, honestly. Just ask them whatever you want. Callum is saying, how does the rating on Metacritic from the games you worked on affect your chances of landing the next job? Metacritic? Not Metacritic related. I think what has a bigger effect on your CV is just the companies that you worked for. If you worked for Ubisoft, if you worked for, I don't know, like Naughty Dog, if you worked for some of those companies, like that opens doors. Like a Metacritic by itself, not really. I don't think so. Yeah, best of luck, Justin. You got this, dude. You got this. Best of luck with it. You also said that your first interview in 2026, the last one you've done was in November. I'm just doing like a fake interview with like, I don't know, some of your industry friends, you know? I heard that the last interview is usually a vibe check. No idea what that means, but this one sounds scary the most for me for some reason. Oh, yeah. I see what you mean. So the last one is usually the reason why they say that it's a vibe check, right? Is let's say you have done like 2 or 3 interviews already. That means that they know your technical capabilities. They know that you're a good team fit because they talked to you already. And they know that they want to hire you, right? Usually the last call is about working out the specifics of, hey, we talked about this salary or maybe this relocation package, but that's not going to work. Can we negotiate something here or there? You know, that's what a lot of people mean, is that like the yes, you already have a yes. Now it just comes down to like the minutia on like how to make it work, you know? Shitty podcast is saying, let's start a studio. Oh, God. The studio. Danny is saying, I remembered I asked so many questions during my interview that we ran out of time. I think that's good. You know, I think that's good. It is really good to have a situation where you can follow up with a bunch of questions, because that shows that you're like, oh my God, really interested, really done your research, you know? Will the studio take several applicants through the vibe check for the final stages, or is it just usually just one, assuming the job posting was for one individual? Well, of course, I can't speak for all studios, right? Like with anything else. But in my opinion, or in my experience rather, if we are really determined to only hire one person, the final interview where we say yes to a person, we just do that one first, and then for whatever reason, if that doesn't work out, then we'll scrap your application and go to the next thing, right? So that's usually how that works, because you don't, as a studio, it's really weird to then say like, hey, we scrapped everyone else, we're gonna hire you, and then you say like, oh, I just accepted something else, sorry guys. Then they have to go back to the people that they just scrapped and say like, hey, there's a place open again, can you come back please? That's weird. So usually they do it just one by one. And then if you're the first one to grab it because they're the most interested in you, you're probably going to get it. That makes the most sense to me. Tum. I love all the encouragement, Leia. I really appreciate it. You're a cool and capable guy. Let's go. Yeah. Best of luck, Justin. Cool. I think we should actually switch it over because we've been yapping for a long time already. So let's actually go into what we're doing here. We are doing portfolio reviews. Surprisingly so. So let me switch it over. Just remove some stuff here. Let's switch it over to our other screen. Let's have a look. So I'm going to be grading your portfolio on hireability, presentation, artistry, and techniques. I'll explain more about what that means as we go through things. But the first one we have today is from Charlie Chrome. Let me link the portfolio in the chat as well for all of you to check out. And Charlie is looking to get into smaller studios, established indies, etc. And I want to have a broader range of skills without being a complete generalist. Focus on stylized games. Interesting. Okay, so first of all, I want you to define this for yourself. What does it mean to have a broader range of skills without being a complete generalist? Because that sounds super vague. If that is your goal, you're going to be running circles around yourself, right? So make it clear. So let's say for examples, I want to be a let's take me for example, right? Like I want to be like an awesome environment artist, that hey Charlie, like I want to be, my example would be like I want to be an awesome environment artist that can occasionally do a little bit of props and is also really good at texturing stuff too, right? Like making tileable textures, for example. But that gives me like a way more narrow skill set, because now I know that I'm not going to be working on VFX or on characters or on whatever, right? So try to define that for yourself and make it very clear. Let me already add that here. You need to define what your skill set means. Because here's the thing, even for smaller companies, right? They still want to see what you're good at. Because if you are good at a lot of stuff, let's say you're good at everything, quote unquote, that means that you also kind of suck at everything too, you know? So that means that for everything that you can do, they can hire someone else to do it better, right? So pick one thing that you want to be your main skill, and then you can show some additional skills to the side that are still relevant to that position, right? All right. Environment artist from London in the UK. Stylized environment artist, Unreal Engine 5, foliage, shaders, and modeling. Open to work, currently art lead on an unannounced indie game project. Cool. Generally, my interests have been foliage, nature type environments, and shaders. Okay, we'll have a look at the shaders, but I can already kind of see that like you have a lot of foliage going on already, which is pretty cool. So let's have a look at how that tracks. Let's open all these links. Let's have a look. Okay, first of all, broken link, not good. Cool. Substance designer materials. Some old stuff in here, which is okay. Like with anything like this, like I don't mind that you have like a Blue Sky account, right? But just link to like the stuff that is like active, because that is always going to look like a little bit better rather than something that hasn't been active in like 8 months, right? Just if you're only like somewhat active to your LinkedIn, or even if you're not active on anything, like LinkedIn is still a better thing to showcase, in my opinion, because at least it is more of a professional take on things. Cool, so you got your portfolio featured, which is good. I would also put your CV in there as well. Actually check here. There's no CV. Yeah, I mean, we do have this little section here, right? But it's still lovely to have, like a CV somewhere that we can just download it and take it with us, right? Open to work, on site. Are you only looking in London? Because that is going to be pretty limiting, right? Especially as a junior. God, yeah, I don't know too many game studios, especially indie game studios, that are doing something in London. Take that with a grain of salt, because I'm so out of the loop with like specifically London. But yeah. South UK preferable. Make it as broad as you can. Because that is going to be pulling people in, right? Because if I see London area, I'm going to be assuming that if I'm somewhere, let's say, I don't know, Leamington Spa, then I'm not even going to talk to you because you're looking for a job in London, right? So make it as broad as possible to where you could feasibly move with like relocation and all that kind of stuff. Right. Let's have a look at the actual work then. Posted last year for the CGMA course. Again, I'm showcasing this. No one is going to be doing this, right? It takes too much time to like load this up. Have your wireframe and your textures like nicely laid out in like a single image. That is going to showcase way better than having to click on stuff here, right? Again, reduce friction as much as you can in your portfolio. You want everything to be snappy and directly in your face. RIP CGMA, yeah. That happened so quickly as well. It was fucking mental. Textures using Polyhaven, Udemy course. Oh, let me actually do some stuff here so that we can read everything. I used what I learned on the Udemy course. Okay, so some coursework going on by Rob Teitel. Makes some really cool stuff. Yeah, the interesting thing with his work is that it is not really made for games, right? So it is kind of cool to kind of see what you can do with like geometry nodes in this setup. But otherwise, there's not too much that like translates to an actual game, right? Because even the textures are courtesy of like Polyhaven. So something like this doesn't really showcase a lot. Let me see. Yeah. No trees to render out the ferns. It renders as a colored cube. In the viewport, it renders as a colored cube to save performance. I mean, this stuff is cool, but it's just like completely irrelevant to like game art, right? Because this is the stuff that you would want to be doing in a game engine, which is sort of like very PCG-like in this way, right? But yeah, nothing too relevant to game art here. So again, I feel like I'm being pretty intense on the first get-go, right? But it's just like if you want to get a job in game art and you want to work on like game stuff, so that you have on your portfolio needs to be game art relevant, right? So exactly, Charlie, what you said just right now, this was made when I didn't really know what specifically I wanted to do with 3D. That's what it reads like. And the question is then for me, why is it on your portfolio, right? That is always going to be the question. The portfolio should be a showcase of like your most relevant skill set that is going to be catering towards the job that you want to do, right? If you have a thing on your portfolio saying like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with 3D, what do you think a recruiter is going to think when they see that then, right? Because they can tell, but you're telling that to them visually, right? That's not what you want to have. So this is a case where like old work that you think is no longer relevant just needs to be gone. It just needs to be gone from the portfolio. This is a very common thing, right? Like people hang on to older work for various amount of reasons. But the only thing that I really care about is if I see some older work on your portfolio, first question that I always have is, why is this here? Because it's why is this here? Because it gives me an indication. There's always a question in my head that is like, do you think this is still holding up compared to your current work, right? That is always the second question following that up. Let's see. First game environment. Nice. A game scene within a month of Devtober, which is a great opportunity to work on prioritization and scheduling. Cool. Modeled everything from scratch in Blender. Nice. Then made procedural textures from the assets in Substance Painter. I use RVTs in the landscape to determine the color of the grass and use HyperBlend to add moss layers onto the rocks. Nice. Okay. This stuff is cool, right? This stuff is showcasing, okay, you're using the game engine now, you're making your own textures, you're doing some cool tech stuff. This stuff is cool. And also the scale of something like this, very manageable, single camera, everything else is blocked off. Really good way to just have like a very curated way to showcase a portfolio piece, right? And then honestly, I don't even mind like this kind of rendering, you know? It kind of feels like you've made something that could be used for a game and you're running through it yourself as well, kind of set up as like a little cinematic, which is cool. I like it. The main thing here is that show me how you've done stuff, right? Show me that you can use workflows that we use in the games industry, right? That's what we want to see, because you're doing some cool stuff here. But I want to see, for example, how you've made the house, right? Like, how did you go about like making a house? Did you use much techniques? What does your UV sets look like? How did you do the texturing? Like all those kind of things, right? Because I have the feeling that this is, and again, whenever you don't have something showcasing me otherwise, we have to jump into assumptions, which are dangerous, right? Because my assumption currently is that you didn't have any high poly information, you didn't use any modular techniques at all. This is just like a low poly that you added into Substance Painter, and then you just baked it onto itself, and then use that as information to do your procedural textures, right? Which is just not correct as a game art workflow, right? So yeah, I mean, it can technically be used in certain situations, but that is the simplest stuff. And like the way that I always compare this is like, if it's super simple to do and everyone is doing it, that means that you're competing with everyone, which is not where you want to be, right? And especially for a stylized artist, what you then want to showcase is going more into depth, right? Taking sculpting to the next level, doing some really cool trim sheet work with like stylized art, like having a look at something like what's the name of the game again? God damn it, the stylized game that like everyone loved. My friend Jasmine worked on it as well. Oh God, people are gonna be shouting at me in the chat. That's okay. But yeah, take inspiration from those games and see how they've done their stuff, and that's basically the template that you need to replicate, you know? Because Jasmine, for example, I think she has done like a bunch of breakdowns of the stuff she's done, right? Wayfinder, that's the one. Look at a post like this, you know? This kind of stuff where you can showcase like, hey, this is a set of this single screenshot is showcasing me a lot of potential, right? Because even in this screenshot, I can see we can make full buildings, we can make partially destroyed buildings, and we can make full ruins with just a single set. This is showcasing just intentionality for wider buildings, right? Like a modular kit. And then just, you know, there's a lot of smart reuse that you can do here, where like you have this beam, you then use that as the base of this beam. You can even see it here, right? So this beam is the same as this beam because we can see the ends, they're the same. And then she just like resculpted like this section of it, right? And then maybe resculpted like the bottom of it. But this is like 80% of the same beam, which is awesome. Right? That is the way that I can immediately see like, okay, this person knows what they're doing because they're trying to be smart about their time. And you can see the same thing here. With this guy, same beam. You know, you can see she's just using the same beam, and then she just like resculpted like this part of it. Super smart. Super efficient with time. That's stuff we want to see. Yeah, like a lot of cool stuff, right? Like a lot of cool stuff here. And then once you have like all these kit pieces, you can literally just like pull them apart, put them together, and you have like a new set of stuff that you can play around with, right? Oh my gosh, yeah, modular stuff is so cool. But look at what the standard expectation is for like a game when it comes to the workflows that they use. Modularity is definitely something I need to work on, but I'm doing a Vertex School course on it starting next week. Nice. That is good. And then we've got the CGMA course right now. Well, not right now, for like a year ago. With Ashley Warner. I wanted to work on storytelling in this project, so I tried to make a little bit more focus this time around. The water, tree, and brick shaders are all built from the ground up. I wanted to push myself. Okay, so we got wireframes going on. The wireframe itself is not ideal. There's a lot of like edges that are just like not really contributing to the silhouette, but presentation is there. I love that you're showcasing your wireframe, which is the reason why I can even scrutinize it. So keep being transparent about your work, right? And keep improving on the technical aspects of it. Cool little shader effect. Then we have a material graph, which I think if you watched like a couple of these sessions already, you know how I feel about material graphs. I think this is not the worst one because I can actually kind of see what you've done, which is okay. But yeah, it's just if you put this in front of me and you show me this, I can kind of get what you're doing. You know, I don't need to see the node-based like setup for it necessarily. But a tech artist might disagree with me and say like, "Ooh, this is actually interesting to look at." So take that with a grain of salt. Right. Okay. One thing that I noticed immediately. This. Okay, so this is the only scene that you've kind of made on your own volition, right? This is made from CGMA. This is... Am I wrong? Oh, shit. No. Go away. Yeah, so this is a Udemy course. And then the first thing is a CGMA course, right? The reason why I bring this up is because from a recruitment perspective, I'm already thinking, this person might require an additional layer of support. Because I'm not really seeing a bunch of work that is made out of their own volition and their own creative drive, right? So that is one thing that I sometimes think about when people do a lot of tutorials or like something that is with a course. That means that there's something going on there behind the scenes that requires a little bit more support, right? So that is something to think about. The way to remedy that, and we talked about this before in Whip Wednesday, especially pertaining to your work specifically. Small projects, smaller projects, even smaller than this one, you know? I think this was a nice scope, you know, but even smaller than this one, totally fine. And just start adding projects onto your portfolio. We need to have projects on there. Like this could be something good. Again, I know I'm kind of going back to her portfolio a lot, but I think she has some like great examples on like how to make a diorama, something like this. This is not like scoped crazy, right? But what it does do, it shows all the techniques that I want to see from a stylized art, right? Like you have some wood sculpting, you have some stone sculpting, you're thinking about the presentation, you have a bit of foliage in there as well. Like something like this size, perfect. And build that muscle of, okay, I'm gonna start with something like this first. Even if it's a single prop, Charlie, do a single prop, you know? If even this is like, yeah, it seems like a bit too much, you know? Do a single prop. You want to make the barrier of entry, you want to make it so low that you stumble over it, you know? That's what you want to do. So if that means for you a single prop, do a single prop. If you've done a couple of single props and you want to level up to like this sort of environment, fine, right? But that's a muscle that we need to start building. Because there's some other examples, right? Like a single prop and just do it like to the best of your abilities, have a nice breakdown. That's it. And focus on the quality, right? So yeah, do whatever you need to do at your stage, at your level. That is the easiest thing to do before you then start overcomplicating things by like adding scope and scale to it, right? Because again, one of the most common things that I keep saying is scope doesn't matter to your portfolio. I want to see quality. If you make big shit, but it looks like shit, then that's what it is, right? But if you can make something small and focus on the quality, that's what I want to see. Yeah. So that would be like my top recommendation. And I know with you specifically, there's more context, right? Because we've been working together. You've been a part of our community for a while. Go smaller. Make it so small that you can almost stumble over like the end result. You can do it in a couple of weeks and then go to the next thing, right? Yeah. Make it really, really small. I know that you're working on something really small, but yeah. I don't know how that's going to contrast with the course that you're going to do now. But even with the course, right? Even from Vertex School, it is good that you're doing a course to kind of teach you on modularity. I mean, there are some really good resources on modularity out there, I would argue. But again, like, if you need to school, that's fine, right? I'm not opposed to it. But what I would do for your portfolio is I would then take those learnings, maybe make a project, maybe publish like the Vertex School project, right? But then take those lessons and make something yourself, right? Because that is going to be more important than just being like, hey, I did this course. This is the end result. Looks good, right? I want to see how you then internalize those lessons and take it to the next level or make it yours. Because that's what we hire artists to do, right? Like, you need to come in with like a creative vision. And use it on the Goop Bridge project? Probably not. Because that Goop Bridge project doesn't have modularity in it. It is not a project that is inherently good to do modularity on, right? Because it is just a bridge. I would, for that bridge, I would probably do something more unique. Because it's just going to be way quicker. Right? If you are doing something where, again, like the reason why we use modularity is because, and I'm gonna go to her portfolio again. The reason why we build in a modular way is because we want to build an efficient kit like this so that we can build something like this with it, right? This all unique is not gonna work. Performance-wise, workflow-wise, it's just not gonna work. So we need to find a way to chop this up. And that gives us more flexibility to build more stuff with in the future, right? But yeah. So sometimes when you have a project, not every project is made for modularity and not every project is made to be unique, right? So it's just, and that's also a skill to showcase in your portfolio where you pick a concept, you execute on a concept, and you pick the right workflow to execute that concept with. It's really important. Cool, okay. So we're gonna be having a look at this. So we already talked about this. Not game relevant, not game relevant. So these two things are gonna go. These two things are actually pretty good. I kind of like them from like a thumbnail aspect as well. So there's nothing really there that I would necessarily say. Maybe there's something that you can do with like playing around with like the warmth of like the house here. But I would say don't focus on the stuff that you have in your portfolio. Focus on new stuff being added to your portfolio, honestly. So yeah. And I think our previous conversation of focusing on a certain skill set is also really important, right? Don't try to be a generalist that is just like good at a lot of stuff because no one's going to hire you for that really. Try to pick one element. Let's say in your case, if it's foliage, try to make the best stylized foliage there is. That should be the goal, right? And maybe, I mean, making the best sounds like a lot of work, and it is, but you need to get into that realm where if I start to associate your name and what you're putting on your portfolio with a skill, right? So that's what we want to be doing. That's what development is like for your career, right? It's just like, okay, this is like, I want to focus on foliage, then my portfolio needs to be a reflection of that foliage. And then it becomes a question of like, okay, these trees, how do you take them to the next level? Right? How do you make them even looking better than this? Right? What do you think is missing? And then again, sometimes it's going on a reference trip, right? Like with reference, I mean, have a look at other stylized trees on ArtStation. Let's see what we can find. This is a cool one. Hey, from Zeracon. Right? Even something like this. Look how beautiful this is. And this is not a complex project, right? But it is well executed. Yeah. That's what I mean. It is a nice scale. And also what is really good here is that she says like, look, this is a beautiful thing by itself, well lit. And then it's like, okay, here's how I did stuff, right? I wanted to emphasize the silhouettes. So here's what I've done. Here's some of the concepts that I followed. And I can follow the progress, right? That's stuff that I want to see. So it doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be good quality, right? So that's a good example. But I mean, Stylized Palm Tree, this one is also pretty good. I like it. But yeah, there's a bunch of really cool ones, right? So this one is also cool, very unique. Yeah, some cool stuff here. Yeah, this is sort of stuff that I want to see, right? If you call yourself, because this is the thing, if you call yourself, I'm a stylized foliage artist, then I want to see you do stuff in the realm where you are already considered a professional, right? Because that's what you get hired for. So if I'm seeing something like this on your portfolio, and then we see the breakdowns like this, yeah, I mean, that increases your chances to getting a job in the industry dramatically, right? Because everything is here. Like you show the progress, you show the final end result, the breakdown. There's some details, like the texture size and wireframes that I'm sort of missing. But apart from that, really well done. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. A pretty short one for this time. But yeah, you need to define what your skill set means to you as an artist, and then focus your portfolio on it, right? I don't want to see you spend, or like, I don't want to see anyone really like spend a bunch of time going from like, oh, I've learned this now, I'm going to learn this. I've learned this. It's like, no, how do we get better at the thing that we're already doing? Because that's actually going to make us marketable, right? So in your case, for example, as you're picking up, let's say something like this, and let's say you were to sculpt it completely from scratch, right? You are going to get better at sculpting, which is then going to translate to becoming better at like making rocks and all that kind of stuff too, right? So yeah. Let's see. Hireability at this point is going to be pretty low, unfortunately, because there's only one real thing that I can really benchmark it on, right? That would be sort of this one, but I'm very dubious about like the workflows used here. So there's nothing too much going on. And then with this one, we do have a breakdown and there's some shader stuff happening, but yeah, it's just not detailed, right? Detailed as in these rocks, they kind of just blend into the sand. There's no blending happening. These stairs do the same thing. Yeah, I'm expecting more attention to detail, breakdowns of like more interesting things that you did in the scene. So like, how did you sculpt the rocks? Like, what's a high poly sculpt? How did you bake it? Like all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah, and then even this sort of texturing, how did you do it? Because I kind of feel that you've made like a tileable and then just slapped it on top of stuff and then hid it away with like vertex painting. I'm being pretty open and honest here, but it kind of feels like it was just like, it might even be like triplanar projection. Looking at like this edge over here, maybe that's just like UV mapping. I kind of can't see it. But yeah, it kind of feels like a lot of this stuff, I want to see more detail, right? Like the individual rocks popping out, like nice sculpts, like taking care of detail, right? Again, we looked at Jasmine's stuff, the way that she sculpted like destroyed arch that she did. Great example, right? That's the sort of quality that we're expecting with this. So hireability is going to be pretty low. Presentation is okay-ish. I kind of like your thumbnails. The thumbnails were pretty good. But then again, like the presentation for the rest of the work is just this sort of stuff is like relatively lazy. I love what you're doing here. Like these videos, they're pretty good. So I think that's going on the right track. So that is already a good sign. But yeah, I'm missing breakdowns. I'm missing individual breakdowns of workflows that you used. Yeah, it's just a lot of game art stuff that I'm missing, right? More game art breakdowns in your artworks. So presentation is going to be pretty low as well. Yeah, because even with the thumbnails, they could be improved just a little bit. But I'm honestly not. My concern is not even like the presentation at this point, right? It's almost arbitrary, like the points that I'm going to give here, because what I really want to see increase is the artistic elements. And then potentially the techniques as well. I mean, definitely the techniques. Because even the techniques that you're doing, right? So, for example, you have like a water shader that uses distance field to create a ripple effect. It is nice, right? But this is not something where it is... How should I say this? And I'm going to go like a broad perspective, right? Just because we can make a nice looking shader in Unreal Engine, that doesn't mean that we're actually good at making shaders, right? Because the stuff that we're doing here, and this is also the stuff that I can do really well, but I wouldn't call myself like a tech artist, right? Or like a person that's going to be hired to do shaders. Because when it comes to the complexity or the intricacies, like, this is not really that complex. I would still show it off, right? But I'm just saying this as a way to like you market yourself as a person who does shaders. This is not enough to get you that job to do shaders, right? So this is more like what you would expect just like any environment artist to do when they're making an environment art piece themselves, right? Which is just like you're doing shader setup. But you're not making like very unique things that can then be used to market yourself as like a shader guy in this case. Not necessarily at this point. So yeah, let's see. Focus on one skill set, get closer to yeah, you want to get closer to what actually is being done in the industry right now. Not even AAA. For example, we had a look at like a bunch of like really nice trees, right? Just go on ArtStation, type in stylized trees. And just look at what other people are doing. And that is what you want to be closer to, right? Because there's some like really good examples in here. Like something like this. Or yeah, some of the examples that we linked before, right? Like the one from Zeracon is pretty good. This one is also really good as well. Just like, yeah. So yeah, have a look what's out there. Pick a skill set and then just really try to get good at like individual things. Like aim for those things and like increase your skill set that way. So yeah, where would I compare your artistry in terms of your techniques? Because that's an interesting one. I think currently, yeah, but that's your breakdowns, right? So there's barely anything there. So I would say let's balance it like this. Yeah, a lot of work still to do, Charlie. The But again, I think that just stems from always trying to go bigger than what you currently can do with your current skill set. And that is normal, right? Everyone goes into this the cycle where focus down on something small, or like, well, the stereotypical thing is like pick a concept, focus on something big, realize that you can't do it, and then probably like just stop working on it, right? Very normal. We need to stop that behavior and just go like smallest thing. Again, you can almost stumble over finishing it, right? Make it super easy. If that is sculpting a single rock, that's fine. If that is sculpting like a rock and then doing the textures for it, that's fine. Whatever is the easiest for you, get into the habit of making something with a specific goal, finishing it, and then moving on to the next thing. Building up that habit. Yeah. And yeah, look around what the industry is doing and see how you can get closer to that. Any follow-up questions, Charlie? Feel free to ask them in the chat. LB Bombs, welcome. I will have to take a quick toilet break, but I'll be right back. If anyone has any further questions about the portfolio that we just looked at, or any other questions of what I just said, feel free to ask, and then we can discuss it in just a second. But give me a second. Be right back. I am back. You've seen our live video about how to start a project, but I've gotten even a better question: how to finish a project. This is the thing I still struggle the most with. It depends on what you're talking about. Like, are you thinking about like the final parts of it? Because that is also like a pretty broad question, right? Because it can literally be like, hey, I started with a project, I don't know how to finish it, and it's still in block out, right? So yeah, give me an example. Because that is a broad question. Yeah. Cool. No questions from Charlie. I hope that was okay, Charlie. Again, I know that I can be pretty intense with these portfolio sessions, but that is just because I'm really trying to be the voice of, well, I'm trying to be the outspoken voice of all the people that visit your portfolio and click away, right? So it does get pretty intense. But yeah, feel free to ask any follow-up questions, Beauty, and also Charlie. In the meantime, maybe let's have a look at the other portfolio. All right. While we wait for the question to come in, let's just switch it over to portfolio reviews again. Let's talk about our second person, Roman. Roman's goals are to grow as a prop artist while gradually transitioning into environment art with focus on photorealistic style. Cool. Let's have a look. So we're talking about props here, not my forte, right? I just want to mention that already in the beginning. Let's have a look at your portfolio stuff first. So 3 artists from Kharkiv in Ukraine, and currently working at Core Punk. Interesting. Engaging in model optimization and preparing for texturing. Cool. And we've got your LinkedIn as well. I would say contact information and just like any information about yourself is pretty sparse, right? Give me a CV, give me something about like your work engagements, your work experience before. Anything at all is going to be helpful. Let's see. Working on the cool axe as well, which is cool to have a look at. Okay, only a couple posts, not too bad. Yeah. Let's have a look. So it's pretty sparse up until this point. I mean, not that I necessarily mind like the LinkedIn being sparse, right? But like at least here, like give me a little bit more of a summary about yourself. Like what do you want to do? You know, like who you are. Like give me something to like make it a bit more specialized towards you, right? Or give me like a nice introduction to things. Like always could be nice. Right, okay, so looking at the props. Pretty good presentation, I like what I'm seeing. From what I know about prop art, we're probably gonna have to look at how tight some of these bevels are, you know, because they're like super tight. Usually what we do in game art is we exaggerate the bevels, which means that we do this for specific reasons, that they capture the light, because that's why we add bevels to things, right? It is to have a glint on like some of our edges, right? So that they capture the highlights and all that kind of stuff better. That just adds to the form and makes it feel like it's not like just a box, you know? But the reason why we exaggerate them is because that then retains that information over a longer distance, right? Because if you have a bigger bevel, it's going to capture that highlight over a bigger distance as well, right? So that's why we exaggerate some of those shapes too. Cool. I will repeat some of the stuff that I have said before in this lesson. Give me breakdowns, show me wireframes, show me UV sets, show me texture sets, anything like that. Give me something that is game art related, right? Because at this point, I'm only seeing like pretty pictures, but it's not really telling me like how you've made something or what techniques you've used or anything like that, right? Let's go to the gas cylinder. In creating this prop, I tried to optimize the processes as much as possible to create and model efficiently and quickly. Okay, this is cool. So tell me what specifically you've done. Because there can be a bunch of really cool stuff happening when you say, hey, I really looked at my pipeline and I tried to optimize as much as I could. So this is how I did it, right? But you're basically saying like, you're almost saying like I have like a cake in a box, right? And you say that you have a cake in a box, but you can't open the box. You cannot look inside of it, you know? It's like, come on, show me the cool stuff, you know? Like if you want me to hire you, like I want to see the cool stuff in your thought process and all that kind of stuff behind it, right? Okay, cool. So we have a breakdown down here. Base color, roughness, metalness, and normal, which is good. Give me also a texture size, right? Let me know what the size of this texture is as well. And then give me a try count too, like a poly count or a try count, whatever you prefer. I don't mind either way, so that I know how many polygons we're looking at here. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, presentation is pretty neat. If we start focusing on like the individual elements, this is not an art review, right? But like there can definitely be improvements on like the texturing and the way that things blend together, especially making more use of the roughness. Because this is the thing, right? Like if you do some of these like very individual like assets, what the focus becomes on is attention to detail. Because a lot of people are doing decent props, but there's only, I mean, not a handful, but there's only like the best of the best that are doing like really nice like texture blending and really looking at like, oh my god, this is gonna get nerdy, right? But like if we look at like gas cylinders, look at like an old gas cylinder, we're just going to be looking at here. You know, even the first image that we can see. I mean, the first not great image that we can see. We can literally grab like anything, right? Even if you look at like all the texture detail that's happening here. Like the little chips where, you know, like some of the chips came in later than some of the other chips. Because this one is partially rusted, these ones aren't rusted yet, and then like the layering of the dust and like all that kind of stuff where it's not equal all over the place. This is the attention to detail that I want to see when you're doing individual texture, when you're doing individual assets, right? Because with a bigger environment, we have the benefit of it being bigger, which means that the individual texture quality or the individual asset quality matters less because we're doing a bigger scope thing, right? But if you are telling me like, hey, I'm an asset artist, I do cool assets, I want to see the attention to detail there. In terms of the layering, the breakup, really all the small things that you would want to see, right? Yeah. Cool, let's see. The hand grenade. So even tiny things like this, right, where you have your roughness here. What is the roughness saying on your normal wood compared to like an area that has like more oil or things attached to it, right? There should be like a more distinct difference between the two. And again, no breakdowns, right? I mean, I feel like I'm going through this one like pretty quick, but there's a lack of a lot of information here, which is the biggest thing, right? I don't know what your UV sizes are, or like your UV spacing is. I don't know what your texture sizes are. I don't know how your roughness and base color and all that kind of stuff looks. I have to make a lot of assumptions. And that's not what you want to do, right? So in terms of like presentation here, I want to see you break down stuff, you know? When it comes to the actual art, I think it is decent, right? I'm still lacking like the details, right? There's a really good Substance Painter course on ArtStation for free that is really worth looking at, right? Just in terms of how to take your textures to the next level. That one is still like the one that I recommend to like a lot of people. Go check that one out. But yeah, it really, when you're doing stuff like this and you're putting the camera into the asset like this, I want to see the smallest detail, right? Like the smallest details, small chips, small little crevices where you have thick dust, then it blends into a smaller dust, and then you have like a couple of specks, maybe you have some cobwebs. Like all that stuff I want to see, right? So yeah. And then because you mentioned you want to transition into environment art, right? With a focus on photorealistic style. I think the transition for you would be, first of all, to look at how we can take your textures to the next level, right? Like really nailing that like hyper realistic style. Then going into something that's more modular. So let's say making your first modular kit or something like that. That could be a good way to start, because then you take all your modeling and your texturing skills and you apply that to like a modular kit. But just start with like something small, you know, one camera, a single corridor, and build it into modular pieces, right? Use that as a test bed to get more into the habit of making environment art. Yeah, honestly, pretty short one. Let me see if there's anything else that I can say. Because right now, there's a lot of stuff missing, right? So, I should honestly make this into like a checklist or something like that. Missing game art breakdowns. There's no game art breakdowns. And texture sizes, yeah, show the poly count, texture sizes, all that stuff. Because yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is also one of my favorite examples from a person from our community that did like a really cool wrench. And you know, like you can see really clearly like the paint and the wood and the texture variation between the two and the chipped edges and all the details, like all these like little added little details when it comes to the letterings not being like 100% legible anymore just because over time, you know, like those details, they add a lot, you know. But this is one of my favorite examples where we're just like, yeah, that's the sort of detail that we want to see, right? And then again, good breakdown, some references in there. That's good, right? This is like one of the benchmark pieces that I would say, if you're doing individual assets, this is the one that I would look at, or one of the ones, right? There's a lot of people that are doing like really good stuff when it comes to this front. Yeah, as you can tell, like interaction based, like damaged, you know, And just having these scratches in where they kind of make a logical sense, you know, like this thing is gonna go up and down, this thing is gonna go up and down, so you see scratches here and there, you know, and it all makes sense. It all makes sense. Anyway, it's more about your portfolio, right? So, yeah, think about those things. Make your, I think you're doing a pretty good job on the thumbnail here. I think that's getting like pretty exciting. I don't know why you desaturated that one though. It feels like you have like a really good thumbnail in your hands, but then you just desaturated it to where, because if you look at the ArtStation front page, right? You're trying to compete with like a bunch of like very vibrant stuff most of the time. So if you desaturate it, maybe that was the intent where you won't stand out because you desaturate stuff. I don't think that's the best way of doing it because you're just gonna disappear in the background, right? I'm not saying that you have to overdo it, but just keep it to normal colors. Yeah, and think about like more interesting angles like this also for this scope, for example. Yeah, and then again, some additional advice when you're going into the environment art field, right? Try to think how you can make multiple assets into a little diorama that can then be turned into like a bit more storytelling focused, right? I know that we talked about like making a modular kit before. Maybe that's probably not the best thing for you to get into. Use the skills that you already have. Make a couple of assets that are consistent in texture quality and tell a cohesive story and add them on top of, I don't know, a cabinet or whatever you want to do, right? But try to get into storytelling and saying something more with them. That would probably be the thing to go there for. Cool. So yeah, a couple of things there, I think. But if we have a look at the stuff that you're doing already, it's a good showcase of your techniques already. Your textures can be improved, right? But you're already showcasing like using the right tools and some like really good knowledge on how to bake and what to add. And like, I'm pretty happy with the standard that you set for yourself already. So if we start with that, I think we're gonna go with, let's say, a 7-ish. Techniques, this is a difficult one because I'm leaning on assumptions, right? So I'm gonna go halfway here. Presentation is okay. Hireability at the moment is pretty low just because I don't know how you're doing things, right? So maybe even like techniques are gonna go down a little bit because I can't trust on assumptions, honestly. I want to be favorable, but if you don't show me things, then... Because here's the thing, like, a company is never going to hire you based on assumptions because that is too risky, right? So I need to be a little bit more stringent with the numbers that I add. But yeah, make a small diorama next with a couple of assets, get into storytelling, branch out into modular kits, like all that kind of stuff. That would be good to look into next. Yeah, so pretty quick one, Roman. I'm gonna add your ArtStation here for people to check out as well. But yeah, let me switch back to the camera. We're gonna do some yapping. So Beauty is elaborating on the question. So yeah, just a reminder, feel free to ask any questions. I'm here to help you with anything that you're stuck with. If that is environment art, career advice, whatever you want, you can ask me. So Beauty is saying I can start a project and work on it for a while, but at some point I lose motivation and jump to another one. So I guess my question is, how do you avoid getting burnt out on a project and finish it? We've been saying it every time, right? Every Book Wednesday, every portfolio review, make smaller stuff. If you get burnt out, or like, well, not burnt out, I think that's I think you just get tired of the project, right? Then that just means that your projects are doing too big, you know? This is what I mean, right? Like, before we were talking about making a project where you can almost stumble over like finishing it, right? In the beginning, it's like a muscle that you train, right? You just have to make like really small stuff so that you can be happy whenever you publish that stuff, and then you can move on to the next thing. right? A couple of other tips is think about how much you're challenging yourself within those projects as well. Because if you are, let's say, you don't know anything, and then you want to make a project that contains foliage, really nice textures, modularity, trim sheets, and all that kind of stuff, you already know where this goes, right? You set yourself up for failure. So look at the current skills that you have. What are you good at? And what are you bad at? And then ideally, based on science, but yeah, you can kind of wiggle with it a little bit. Stick to your comfort zone for like 80% of the things that you're already good at. Then add like 20% of a challenge on top of it, right? Some people will skew this number. For example, I think that I'm pretty well versed to just like any sort of shenanigans. I get a lot of satisfaction of just like running into a wall and then figuring something out, and then just like I get a lot of satisfaction from that, right? But if you just want to get to like the end result for like a portfolio piece, it has to be smaller. It just has to be smaller. And also a thing is, here's also another important part, right? There's a difference between motivation and discipline. Motivation is, I go on ArtStation. Oh my god, I found this really cool concept art. I'm gonna do this. This is gonna be so much fun. And then 2 days in, when you actually have to do it, you're like, well, I kind of don't like it anymore. You know, like, yeah. A lot of people rely on that. That is not a good thing to rely upon. What you should be relying upon instead is discipline. And that means every day, half an hour at least, do the work. Whether you like it or not, do the work. Show up, do the work. That's what you need to do. So all those things kind of go hand in hand, right? So pick a project of the right scale. Pick something that is within reasonable challenge levels, right? And then show some grit and show up every day. Those three things in combination are deadly, right? Like that's if you look at the stuff that I'm doing for Beyond Extend, let's say, it's totally outside of my wheelhouse, right? But over time, it's been built upon those like three simple principles. So yeah, that would be my approach. Leia is saying, usually it fixes to choose a smaller project size and also setting a time frame. Oh, that's actually a good one. I like the time frame one. Having a deadline. So for example, a small table scene that needs to be done in 6 weeks. Also, to add on to this, I like your addition of the time frame. Make that time frame accountable to someone else. And you know what is a good way? Let's say we're friends and I need to get something done. I'm gonna come to you, Pewdie, and I'm like, hey, I really need to get my shit together. I am gonna give you 50 euros. If I finish this project in 6 weeks, my little table scene that like Leia said, I'm gonna finish that in 6 weeks. If I do, you give me my money back. If I don't, you get to keep it. I think you're gonna hit that deadline. So that's the thing, right? Like that is a way of creating external accountability. There's multiple ways of doing this. For example, I did this for the longest time with my blog, right? I set a deadline for myself every Thursday by 8, or every Wednesday by 8. I can't remember the day. It's been a while. I would say I would have to have a blog out regardless of what I was doing that week. So that meant that, oh, I want to do stuff for this blog, then I need to work on personal work, because usually I share some personal work development when it comes to my blog, right? So that adds pressure there. But it was just because I had to publish it and people were looking at it. And there was this expectation of like, hey, people are going to see this. And if I don't put in the time and the effort, people are going to be disappointed, right? That is also a way of creating external accountability. But it's honestly up to you, you know? I think having a direct person, whether it's a partner or another person that's an environment artist or your mom or your dad, try it with them, right? Have a person just being like, because sometimes you need that person to come into the room or into your Discord call and say like, hey, where are you at? You know, how's the project doing? Because it seems like you're slacking a little bit, you know? And that can be anything, you know? Why? Okay, here's the thing. Why do you think Work in Progress Wednesday is weekly? And some people show up every week consistently. And there's a lot of people that don't show up. I have a pretty good knowledge of who's going to make it. Just based on that simple factor, you know? And I'm not saying that like my thing, like my Whip Wednesday is like the only thing that should be used as a benchmark for people that are going to make it, right? That's stupid. But it is an indication of the people that do show up consistently every week, showcasing their work, getting feedback, improving, doing the same thing, right? Is that consistency that matters. And a commitment, yeah. Leia, 100%. Like, there are moments where, well, there are hundreds of times. Because if you think about it, I published like 252 blog posts on ArtStation or something like that, right? That is like for every week. I was doing this consistently for like 4 to 5 years or something like that, right? Has there been weeks where I've failed? For sure. But there's also a lot of weeks where I committed to it and I said like, hey, look, I'm not going to drop this. It's not going to happen. And I showed up and I made it. And it gave me also the appreciation of, hey, if things are rough, if let's say I have a busy week, I can still do this though. And it gave me confidence in that I can be consistent and I can show up and I can do all this stuff. Just by me doing it, you know? I have the choice. But yeah. You could use it to your benefit as well. Make a post on LinkedIn about an upcoming 6-week project, then show high-risk screenshots every week as a post. Accountability plus visibility. Yeah. Something like that. You know? Whatever works best for you. And also experiment with this stuff, right? I think we've got like a bunch of examples here. Talk to your friends. Use LinkedIn. Use ArtStation. Use Whip Wednesday. Whatever you need to use. Whatever gives you the best feeling of accountability. Use that. Nizhnigov is asking, is ArtStation ever going to do big ArtStation challenges again? I feel the latest ones are mostly sponsored content events. Probably not. It seems highly unlikely that they will, you know? I don't think that's their priority at the moment. They got bought out by like Epic Games, and it's just they have a different priority for what the platform is, right? Compared to like the old owner, I think. So yeah, I wouldn't hope about like big ArtStation challenges coming back. But hey, we do them. We just finished one. So if you're ever interested in doing a big environment art challenge, we got one coming up in October. Hey Tim, I just wanted to say thank you. I published my project yesterday and it wouldn't come out this level without you. Hey, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. I saw it. Congratulations on publishing it. Leia saying at the end, consistency is key. Yeah. Because here's also the thing, right? Like, and I've said this many times before. I don't think I was a talented artist. I was pretty mediocre. You know, and to like a certain degree, I still am. But what made me somewhat more successful than other people is that I was consistent. And that was my thing. Like where other people had like freaking creative periods and they were like just like exploding, they would then like drop off and then like have to build back up again. Where I was just like, I was in the middle, but I was steady. Or well, it's not like a flat line. It's more like my waves were like less high and low than some other people that I was surrounded by. Ashish is saying, I basically play like very little games these days. I choose to make art, and frankly, that is more fun. I play very little games these days. I choose to make art, and frankly, oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I got it. Here's the thing, right? Like even if you still want to play games, which is totally fine, even switching up the way that you structure your life around it, so that you do the work first and then you play games, is way better than doing it the opposite way. I was going through a period where I switched it up, and I was like, look, I just work like 8 hours a day. I just want to come home, play some games first, and then in the evening, I'll do some art. And can I let you in on a secret? I never did art when I was doing those days. Because it is really hard to go from, oh, I'm relaxed, to, oh, I need to get back into work again, right? I switched it up. I was like, I come home, I eat, I sit down at the table, not in the sofa, because again, it's relaxing. Sit down at the table, I eat, get back into work. And that's how I do stuff, right? Even now, to this day, like I don't really tend to play games until like all the way like late in the evening, like when basically before I go to sleep. That's when I play a couple of games. But even I just want to make sure that like those small little adjustments that you do in life, like doing the art first and then doing the game after, that has like a huge impact. It has a huge impact. And that's also a thing, like experiment with these things, right? And also to your point, Ashish, I was thinking that you were talking about like you play little games with yourself, as in, and this is something that I'll do myself as well, right? Like that's why I love post-it notes, because what I'll do, I know that I don't know what kind of personality that is, but like I try to turn everything into a game. So for example, God, do I have a good one to show off? Whenever I make like a post-it note and I add like checkboxes to it, right? I will then try to hit as many checkboxes as I can, because it just turns into a little game for me, you know? And then I can still pick like, oh, I only want to hit like 5 things today. Sure, I only make like a post-it note with 5 checkboxes, right? And that's it. It turns into like a little game. Sweetheart is saying thank you for the content, and thank you for coming in and to enjoy it. I appreciate it. Hello, Artyom. Good to see you here, buddy. How are you doing? Leia is talking about the challenge. It was a great challenge. Definitely recommend. I learned a lot, especially getting to know teammates, scheduling workloads, and finding compromises together. It enhances my soft skills for sure. Yes, that's what we're doing them for. I just wasn't talking about that necessarily, but usually in the morning, first things I would do is disable YouTube and Instagram. Yeah. I mean, I do the same thing. Like I only have like LinkedIn on my phone, and LinkedIn is actually like a pretty boring like social media platform. The way that I set it up, at least, you know, I get people's like updates when they got like a new job and all that kind of stuff, but there's nothing really keeping me on the platform, which is good. I usually browse like, I don't know, 15 minutes of LinkedIn. Then I'm like, oh, I'm done. Okay, time to get up and do some stuff. So yeah. And that's again one of those things, right? It's recognizing. I'm trying to be broad with this, right? Because this can be applied to like so many things. It's recognizing how you react differently when you change things up, and then making that a part of your normal routine, you know? Which means it can be social media stuff, right? Like removing it from your phone. That is one thing that you could try. Also, using post-it notes instead of doing like a Notion page or whatever you want to do, you know? It's filling your calendar with little time blocks instead of having like, hey, a dedicated time a day where you sit down and do the work for like half an hour. Like those small things, they can drastically change the way that you do the stuff that you do. But it's what I really want to get at is you have to experiment with those things, right? So Yeah, for me, what works is having that constant routine where, before I would come home from work, we would sit down for dinner, we would chill a little bit, and then I would go into work again, right? And that has just become such a continuous routine that it's almost like automatic, you know? There's also a downside to this where like it's become such a routine now that I need to do the opposite thing too. I need to make more time for friends. I need to make more time for my partner, for the dog, like all that kind of stuff too, right? But again, you're constantly tweaking things. I have no social media on my app, almost no apps either. Made something 10 years ago to not have that much on the phone. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I don't really use my phone all that much, actually. Like, what do I use it for? I use it for maybe a bit of banking stuff. Some WhatsApp calls with like my mom specifically. And that's about it. Oh yeah, scrolling LinkedIn in the morning, for sure. But yeah. My mindset is that everyone can get into the industry. It's just whether when you will get it, that's the question. If you're okay with the teammates getting in faster, don't have a routine. Take it easy. But if not, you have to commit and have a stricter schedule. Yeah, it just comes down to how bad you want it, right? Because I think everyone can make it in if they commit to it, right? It's just that a lot of people don't really commit themselves to it. Because, yeah, that's what it comes down to, Because even when running beyond extent, right? There's a lot of people that I see that I'm like, oh my god, if I had a studio, I would love to work with them. Because they just have it, They post work consistently, they show up, they engage a little bit with other people. They're just like, those people are going to be there, right? And there's also people that are still like struggling to get in. And like you said, Leia, like that's not necessarily that they're not going to make it, but they need to. Yeah, it can be so many things, right? They need to commit. I think this the reality of this industry is that it is going to demand commitment from you, whether you want to or not. Unless you start your own company, right? And then make your own little indie games, that's totally different. But if you want to work in this industry, I think it is going to expect a baseline commitment. So yeah. But yeah. Because I think this is just like you can't really coast and then hopefully get in, Like I don't think that's gonna happen, honestly. And I used to, it's weird, right? Like I used to be in the same mindset where I was like, yeah, everyone can get in, like everyone has their own things, like their own kind of commitment. Well, not even their own kind of commitment. Everyone has like their own routines and their own schedules, but they will make it in. And I think I've sort of come back from that where like some people, they need to change things up before they then have the possibility to get in. So that means that by necessity, not everyone can get in, unless they change things up. Oh well. But yeah, it is interesting. But yeah, I do love that about this industry though. Like if you put in the time, you put in the work, you present yourself well. Yeah, there is a path for you in this. You have to strategize, see it more from a roadmap perspective. Yeah. 100%. That's true. Because I know people from like across the spectrum, and I mean this like the broadest possible spectrum, right? Like working class family, like with like wife and kids, like a lot of commitment already there, still putting in like an hour after their work, like wherever they can, like half an hour to an hour, like every day. Those people, I've also seen them get into the industry. And I've also seen the opposite spectrum where, you know, like really, really committed people, but they just don't know how to commit themselves properly, not get in for the longest time until they then like switch things up and then get into the industry, right? So yeah, it is a good topic. I would love to discuss this with like other people as well, see what they think. Because I feel like my mindset has shifted over time, where I've seen enough people now to kind of recognize the people that will make it and the people that won't necessarily make it unless they make some drastic changes. But yeah. All right. I do have to go because I do have to run to another meeting. But it was really nice chatting with you all. I hope you enjoyed the portfolio reviews. And you know what to do. You know, like give us a like, share this with friends, invite other people to become a member of our beautiful family, or our community. I don't know, the family in like a personal content has like a bad connotation. But yeah, we are working hard on getting like the website completely refreshed. I'm really looking forward to finally publishing that. And then we are going to be diving into like our next biggest chapter with all the courses and the lessons and the academy stuff coming online in the near future. So if you are interested in that, feel free to message me in the Discord, because we are looking for a group of people of early access, you know. Okay, quick question, Shitty Podcast. I also have a quick question. How is the Beyond Extend community? Is the Discord active? I'm currently feeling a little bit exhausted of working all by myself in the past couple of months. I mean, I'm going to be biased, right? Because I'm the founder of the community. I think it is not too busy, but it is active. And I think that's also what I like about it too. Yeah, I really enjoyed the flow of the community, where like it's not too busy, but you can still get yourself known and you have like a voice in the community too. So yeah, Harry is saying it's active for sure. Yeah, active in a good way, I would say, the way that I prefer it. Perfect format. First time that I'm watching this. Hey, Conceptual Vision, thank you so much for watching it too. And so to respond, I will checking it out. Yeah, do it. There are quite a good few Discords out there. Oh yeah. Yeah. Because we are a paid Discord, right? But there's other Discords out there too that you can browse to. If you sit in a voice chat, people will always pop through in chat, 100%. And I try to make time for that too. So if you ever are in the Discord community and you are just sitting in a voice channel, I will probably pop in. Love chatting with people. So, all right. That being said, I'm out. Have a good one, people. Have a creative week or weekend, I should say. And we'll see each other back next week, Wednesday.